Well, welcome. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Me too.
I'm so interested in talking to you more about your spirituality. I know very little about Judaism, so I'm also excited to learn about that. But how it guided you into your turfing too was
Yeah.
when I saw your stories, I was really intrigued. So I wanted you to join me for the spiritual feminist
Yeah,
series
yeah.
I do.
I I have a lot to say. Not shockingly, a lot of people don't know a lot about Judaism. So and unfortunately, the like the mainstream kind of, forward-facing Jewish community tends to be pretty secular and very liberal. And so we kind of get this not stigma, but like there's just like a stereotype that we're all like, really open-minded, which a lot of them are. And I mean, I'm open-minded to an extent. I think if you're too open-minded, your brain will fall out. So
I hear you on that. Um, so do you consider yourself conservative then?
I probably center right at this point.
Okay.
As I've gotten more in tune with my faith, I've gotten a little more of a stickler. I've become a bit more of a stickler about certain things, and we were talking about this in my, not we, I was talking about the royal we. I was talking about this in my Instagram story that something that I've been thinking about quite a lot is the sort of trying to contextualize the passage in Leviticus that says a male shall not lie with another male as he does a woman. And how much strife and torment and abuses of human rights that's brought to homosexuals, particularly gay men, because in Torah it doesn't say anything about females lying with another female. So obviously any kind of homosexuality is frowned upon in the Orthodox communities, but I feel like, as usual, like the women aren't counting as much. Like it's definitely more of an abomination when it's two men. And personally, the reason, and I've heard other people have this sort of interpretation, I don't know the history well enough. I should actually probably dig into it. But around the same time that the ancient Israelites were developing sort of their code of ethics and that they were praying to one God, around them were a lot of pagan religions or pagan groups, ethnic groups that worship paganism and multiple gods. And those societies, like the Romans, for example, tended to have a lot of pederasty. And I think
What's
they,
pederasty?
like, pedophilia, basically.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So like the ancient Romans, for example, and the Greeks, it's pretty well known that not only was, homosexuality cool, but there was boy love as well.
Yeah.
So
Elder man with the younger boy. Yeah.
yeah.
The
And
Greek way is what when I was studying abroad in Athens, a guy was hitting on my friend who's gay, and he's like, "Oh, you want to learn the Greek way?"
mm, mm-hmm, yeah. So it's interesting. I look around now and seeing how the TQ plus has ushered in the plus being pedophile into the mainstream. And now we're talking about maps and we're having to have uncomfortable discussions, and there's, pornography in children's libraries. And then we get told that this isn't happening, but you can see online, the books that are being banned are things like uh oh I
Gender
just
queer.
yeah, gender queer. And there was one I was just reading about yesterday in the tub. Why can't I remember it? I know the author's name is Erica Moen. And it's funny because there's so much controversy with this book because there is explicit sex acts in it. And they're talking about, there's like cartoons of, jacking off and
What's her name? Is that the one that was going viral because she like said negative things about porn, but not really? What's Erica what?
Erica Moen. So Moen. It's actually very pro porn. That's what's messed up about it. Where it's
Okay.
like,
It's I'm trying to find the
let's
name of
talk
the
about it.
book.
I think is
Oh, Joy sex toy, is that?
it's Let's Talk About It. That's the one.
Let's talk about it. Okay, I see. Yeah, okay.
And people are just, oh, it's a sex ed book for teens, no big deal. But some of the pictures that libs of TikTok, for example, have posted on Twitter, it's again like explicit graphic detail of sex acts, which
Yeah, and probably including anal sex, right? Which is
oh yeah,
dangerous
absolutely.
for women and girls too. It causes more health risks.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a passage about, how to finger your own butthole, you know? Yeah. And saying that
Wow.
is calling porn kind of like a dessert or like a sweet, like if you have too many sweets, it's going to mess you up. So porn is just something that you can enjoy a bit and it'll help you explore your kinks and your fantasies. And it's like, why are we talking about kinks with teenagers? You know,
Yeah,
it's a pornified world. And
yeah.
so I would imagine, as I've been looking around. I'm obviously I have many gay people in my life. I love normie gays, as I like to say,
Hmm.
but not the activists, not the TQ plus lunatics. And as I said in my Instagram story, my synagogue, we don't perform gay marriages, but if you're gay and married, like come and daven with us. We're cool. We're not gonna kick you out. We're sticking to that specific thing. Like we're not going to be orthodox about it and be like, get the fuck out of here, or we're not even going to talk about it, because that's something I've heard about in more modern orthodox circles is like it's like a don't ask don't tell kind of policy. And I like kind of being in the middle there, because right now it is getting really crazy, and so I can understand why maybe looking around back thousands of years ago, seeing all these like boy lovers mingling with gay men and then being like, okay, we're calling it quits on all of that. No men with men, period, because look what happens, and
Yeah, you can
people
kind of see a sliding back of support for gay rights right now. I read a poll recently, and even if you, obviously, the significant loss of support was within the GOP, but there was even Democrat voters are less supportive of gay marriage. It's unfortunate because I support gay marriage and gay rights, but they're as you see what's happening with women's rights, we're like the TQ plus is damaging gay rights and women's rights.
Yeah, absolutely. So seeing how things are today, because another thing that obviously gets held against Abrahamic religions is like your religion is homophobic. So, I'm lumping you all in with all the homophobes and all of that. But now looking around at the things that are going on today, I'm like, well, I can understand why people would start getting a little homophobic, because look at what they're seeing. Not that I'm excusing homophobia, but like you said, the support
It's
for
a
gay
backlash
marriage.
happening because it's
Mm-hmm.
just it's realistic. It's what's really happening. It's if you read a poll and stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the people who, were opposing gay marriage back in 2013, we're like, well, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. And all of us were like, get out of here. And now it looks really bad, because it does look like it was a slippery slope, even though,
Yeah, it wasn't though. That's what's so frustrating.
yeah.
It's like this happened because of money interests
Mm-hmm.
and because activism as a profession or as an industry needed something
Mm-hmm.
else. The slippery slope wasn't really about gay marriage as much as activists still needed to make money and obviously farm interests with a TQ.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's sad, obviously, that both our rights and gay people's rights are being eroded by this. But I also feel like, how do I say this? Well, I'm probably going to offend somebody anyway, so I might as well say it.
All right.
I have some spicy
It's a turf channel. We're all
Yeah,
about
yeah, exactly.
offending.
I have spicy opinions about things. I feel like there was not enough self-regulation within the alphabet community, as I like to call them now, because they just keep adding things. I think that at first, well, I don't know, because I spent so much time in the queer scene before I got really spiritual and took Judaism really seriously. I was in the LA gay nightlife. I was doing drag. I was doing all of this crazy stuff. And I would look around sometimes. I'd be like, guys, like even for me, this is getting really fucked up. Like, why are we like this? There were jokes within our circles of like, actually, we don't deserve rights at this point. Like, y'all are acting fucking crazy, you know?
Like, what
So,
was going on?
oh, I mean, a lot, and especially in Los Angeles. I mean, I would do performances at like dungeons and weird sex things, a lot of
Okay.
warehouse parties on Skid Row, lots and lots of drugs, um, and just a lot of, I mean, I really don't know what else to call it, but degeneracy. But that was the queer community, you know, like there's a difference. Queer is a political affiliation, and it's
Yeah.
a lifestyle of subverting the norms and pushing back against, you know, whatever normal society is, I guess. I mean, society is not normal right now anyways. I don't think it ever has been.
No.
But you know,
We're in a free fall though. It's pretty nuts to witness what's going on right now.
and coming from queer theory, I mean, all of that is about subverting everything. And that's
Mhm.
why in queer academia, you get the idea of like queering certain things. So queering heterosexuality is then, you know, straight people who like to just do weird, kinky shit in public. Queering disability, that's another thing, like queering fat liberation or whatever. It's queering everything is that's just part of it. Like the political activism almost in like the queer community is intentionally subverting everything that that we've decided as like a country or a community. You know, with any kind of community, you sort of have a moral contract of like,
Mhm.
you do whatever you want to do, especially in America. That it was kind of founded on personal liberties, and you know,
Yeah,
you do,
individualism.
yeah, it as long as it's not infringing on my shit, you do you. And when I finally peaked, which is funny because for a long time I was experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance because I was definitely super mentally ill. A lot of my body dysmorphia came from sexual trauma, you know, the trans thing. I because I was in the drag scene, kind of I got indoctrinated, you know, and it just when I first started out hearing about all this trans stuff, I had turf brain immediately. I was like, none of this makes sense, you know? But then you get to know a lot of these people, and I know plenty of, you know, and now I call them impersonators of the opposite sex because I don't even want to use their language. You know, opposite sex impersonators who are very lovely, kind, nice people that I feel very bad for. That's the thing, is like they really, that's how they get you, is they play it up and how bad you feel for them. And when you witness it firsthand, you're like, well, maybe, you know, maybe this stuff does make sense. And there was always, I always had in the back of my mind that little turf, you know, the little turf in the back of my head saying, this man who's pretending to be a woman, saying that, you know, his ultimate goal is to be a slut and a bimbo, and is
Oh God.
staring at his face in the mirror after facial feminization surgery. You know, I was like, this shit seems whack, you know, but it was also, he
Yeah.
was my friend and we had so much fun and we were party buddies. And I think that's how it's really easy to fall into that. If you're somebody who's susceptible to addiction, to black and white thinking, because there's a lot of mental illness within the trans community. Obviously, trans is a mental illness to begin with. It's just so easy to get caught up into it. And once you're in it, then it's really, really hard to see how unacceptable your public behavior is. You know, it's
Yeah.
you don't understand, you can't see that your mentally ill behavior looks crazy from the outside because you're all about queering everything. So it's like, oh, I'm intentionally being subversive. I'm intentionally doing this. I look back at some of the drag that I did that was kind of Jewish themed, because I was on the tail end of my drag careers when I started really getting into Judaism, or, you know, going to synagogue and doing all that stuff. And in the interim, sort of between fully peaking and you know, being in the drag scene, I was doing numbers that I was like, oh, this is like subverting Judaism, and isn't it like a serve and all of this stuff. Now I look back on it, I was like, oh, that is so offensive. I can't believe I did that. Like, it's such an
Yeah.
affront to the things that I believe in. And so that's, I just, when I hear like queer Jews, I'm like, ugh. I started where I was living at the time, I went to a synagogue that was Reform and conservative, because the Judaism I was familiar with was Reform. I didn't really have much of.
What's Reform? Like non-Orthodox, basically, or?
Oh yeah, I should probably explain this. So there are three branches of Judaism in the American diaspora. And actually Reform also started in Europe, probably in the mid to late 1800s. It's basically like, we're modern people, we're assimilated people. We're not like those weird Jews with the beards and the peyotes and the black hats. We're not like those crazy people. We're cool Jews. We just have our 1.5 hour services on Friday nights, and maybe we do the challah and the light the Shabbos candles and just say quick Shema, and then we're out of here playing guitar. And it doesn't have a lot of connection to the text. And when I say that, that's the thing, is I'm going to piss off a lot of Reform Jews, but most of it's in English. I would go to Reform services, and the majority of it was in English. There was a little bit that was in Hebrew. And it didn't seem as connected to the spiritual practices. And, it's just like, it's kind of like the universal Unitarianism of Judaism, if that makes sense. And then Orthodox is kind of, sort of like a Ben Shapiro. Like, he's an Orthodox Jew. He's able to live in modern society, but, he does Shabbos on Friday night, doesn't do any, doesn't go out, probably walks to synagogue. I'm assuming these things just because he is Orthodox. He lives in in a city where you can probably walk to a synagogue. And then conservative is the one that's kind of in the middle. It's called conservative because it's conserving the traditions of the Orthodox, who, they pray when they wake up right in the morning. They're praying 3 times a day, very strict about following commandments. Whereas conservative is like, we get it, you have a life, but it's important that you come at least on Saturday mornings and daven with us, and, be committed to synagogue life, and very Hebrew heavy. Thankfully, because the synagogue I was going to was Reform and conservative, I was like, I should check out a conservative service, because I've never been to one, don't know what to expect. It's nice to be able to not wake up early on a Saturday and go to the Friday night service and, do some bongos and guitar. But let me see what conservative's about. And from my first service, 3.5 hours, almost all of it in Hebrew, I just completely fell in love. It was like I was hearing Torah for the first time. Like it hit different. There's a musicality to it. Hebrew is one of the very few languages in the world that was revived. It was almost completely, due to, thousands of years of pogroms and genocides. And, another problem of assimilating is they try to get you to stop using your own language. So Hebrew was almost a dead language, and thankfully it got revived. And so when you hear Torah, when you hear it in that Hebrew, it's like you hear all of the ancestors, all of the patriarchs and matriarchs sort of chanting these things to you. It's really profound. And I felt that was missing in Reform, And so as soon as I went to the conservative services, I was like, I got to keep doing this. And so I joined the conservative movement. And, it's brought a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just the spirituality, but the ability to really stop and think, not only before I speak, but before I form an opinion on something. When you're indoctrinated into the leftist woke bullshit, whatever, you say, like, I'm not even going to look at the other side. I'm not even going to entertain what they're saying, because they're all bigots and fascists and Nazis. And, I can't listen to them because that would make me a bigot and a Nazi, and it's all propaganda and yada, yada. And now I'm at a place where, like, okay, well, if you want to get to the truth of something, because truth is, personally, in my opinion, and it's very, very pushed in the conservative movement as well, that like truth is so central in Judaism. Another problem that I have with Reform is they're very centered around something called tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. And they've very much secularized that idea, because my understanding of Tikkun Olam is repairing the Jewish world, really focusing on Jews, making sure that we are upholding our ethics and living a life that is in tune with the Torah, whether or not you're super, Orthodox, ultra Orthodox, you have to do these mitzvot. It's got to be, Shabbos always starts 18 minutes before sundown. It has to, there's that, or even just like the modified version, as long as you're keeping Torah in your life, we call it Etz Chaim, tree of life. Those roots, the Torah is the root of Judaism. And once you start letting go of that, in my opinion, personally, I think that's where we just keep going wrong as a group of people.
Is letting go of like the original roots of Judaism.
Or twisting, and this will lead into the other thing that I've been talking a lot about on Instagram, but sort of twisting the intent of Torah into something that is more attractive to Gentiles, so that they don't hurt us. So if we do a song and dance for the Goyim, they're not gonna round us up and kick us out and take all our stuff and throw us down a well. But then you start, and this is where I have my problems with, this is where I have serious problems with reform, is then you start disseminating ideas about the Torah and Judaism that are very disconnected from what the majority of religious Jews believe about it. So going back to the Tikkun Olam thing, that's turned into a social justice movement in the reform movement, where it's more focused on like, we have to save everybody, we have to repair the whole world for everyone. That's our duty. When it's, for me, Tikkun Olam is focusing on making sure that the Jewish world, the Jewish people, the diaspora, the land of Israel is like in tune with itself and in tune with the truth of the Torah. And
so Tikkun Olam means what?
Repairing the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like when the reform movement turns Tikkun Olam into something that's for everybody, and they take up every social justice cause they possibly can and try to be as welcoming as possible. It's good to be welcoming, but it's also good to screen the people who are coming in. And reform has been really, really, like I said, if you're too open-minded, your brain falls out of your head. They've been letting in as many people as they can because membership is down and they want to bring more people. And hey, it couldn't hurt to have more Jews. But then they do this just meshuggah stuff like, when trans people want to convert into Judaism, in reform, they're allowed to take if they're a man, they can take a female name. They don't have to get circumcised. If they already are circumcised, they don't have to do, there's a version of the Brit Milah where if you're already a circumcised man and you're converting into Judaism, since you can't have your foreskin taken off, they take a needle and just get a drop of blood from the end of the penis and then say a little blessing, and there you go. It's like a metaphorical circumcision. They don't make males, they don't make men who claim to be women do that. And I feel like, okay, well then that didn't count. In my opinion, then you're not a real convert because you didn't actually make that covenant.
I do find it very strange how the T has been able to capture Christianity, and I guess apparently Judaism too, just because God made you who you are. There's no mixing up bodies. I just find it very strange, and especially because there's such a history of non-acceptance, and then all of a sudden it's just like, I don't know. I find it very strange that
I do as well.
It's like modifying the body seems like it should be not Christian. Like if God made you who you are, then he didn't mix up body and spirit.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want you to mutilate your body.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's crazy. I mean, tattoos, for example, are still very taboo. I have tattoos because, again, I was hanging around with Jews who were like, hey, whatever, it's a tattoo, who cares? You know, now I'm like, now I feel a little self-conscious about all the tattoos I have when I'm in my conservative synagogue, because really not many people there have tattoos. Some of the younger people do, but most people that are going to synagogue, at least where I'm going right now, are old people. Like I'm one of the youngest people showing up to Shabbos on Saturday morning. And, you know, so I've met some of the younger, there's a group called the Jewlennials at my shul. And so there's a couple of tatted people there, but I mean, the Reform rabbi at the Reform/conservative synagogue I was attending even called one of my tattoos a kosher tattoo, which is like ridiculous, you know?
What is a
And
kosher tattoo?
it's that's why reform is nonsense. Like they shouldn't be encouraging this type of behavior, because you can't have a kosher tattoo. It just doesn't line up with the law of like, you can't slice your skin, you can't pierce the skin. You know, obviously in modern times, there's exceptions, because life, l'chaim, is the thing that we value above all. So if you have to get a shot or you have to have surgery to save your life, then that's permitted, which is how I think that the TRAs have been able to capture Judaism in particular, because they fall for the, you know, gender affirming care is life saving.
Yeah.
You know, so that I find to be incredibly unfortunate, because if trans was still categorized as the mental illness that it is, and not thought of as like the fact that it's gotten so medicalized, it's almost like it's, it was like this illness thing where I accidentally ended up in the wrong body and I just got to do some surgeries and it'll be all fixed. You know, it's like, that's not what it is. It's crazy to think that you are trapped in the wrong body. And I can understand how painful that is. We feel bad for, you know, if we're using Blanchard's terms, the transsexual homosexuals.
Yeah, that's where my sympathy begins and ends, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I think straight AGPs can.
They can, they can, you know? But I think that's when I was saying earlier about the alphabet community sort of not checking itself and not self-regulating. I think that comes from the sympathies for the transsexual homosexuals, you know? And I think gay men in particular feel very protective of that, you know, subgroup within them, because that's really what they are. They're just transsexual homosexuals. It's right there in the title. You know, they're a subgroup of homosexual men. And it, you know, in the past, there was that time where it was really tragic to be transsexual.
Well, I was under the impression when I first heard about all this stuff, and it was, you know, like a 2015, 2016 timeframe, I thought the majority of them were gay, just gay men, effeminate gay men that, you know, that had dysphoria and felt more comfortable presenting as a woman. So it was really fine with me. And then, like, I mean, I had an issue with the trans women are women for a number of reasons. I like trans women. Okay. Now I just say trans identified male, but it was more of the newspeak of it, like trying to get me to change, like the thought policing, the language policing. That was a big red flag for me at first, along with the medicalization. But I didn't realize that the majority, like 75%, are AGP.
Yeah.
And that changes things drastically. And I feel like if more people knew about that, and now slowly they're starting to, but I think that would change people's perspective immediately, because everyone thinks, oh, it's like pose, or, you know, or like, and most people don't realize that the majority of these men are heterosexual. Yeah, exactly. That pose is based off of Paris is Burning, I think. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen Paris is Burning?
I saw that.
That one transsexual, that, I mean, very effeminate, like actually, I would say past more than most of the ones today, you know, and very small, very feminine, talking about how he's going to get his surgery and it's going to be really great. And you can just see it's a very tender soul that's probably been very, and then he ended up dying of AIDS, and you just, you feel so bad for them, you know? And how do you not feel bad for them? But there you go. It's right there in the thing. If you have this idea that that's how all of them are, you're totally disregarding the fact that it's a fetish for 75% of them.
Yeah.
So, and I do think some of them today also, I think there's a more fetishistic aspect to transsexual homosexuality. I think when Blanchard was talking
Yeah.
in the past, it was probably true then that it wasn't as fetishistic, probably just very deep suffering. But now even with the gay ones, it's feeling
Yeah,
performative.
if you're gonna pornify yourself like that, if you're gonna like pornify yourself to the point you're a walking sex doll, like I'm gonna look at you sideways.
Yeah, yeah. Like I,
Yeah.
a lot of people, a lot of not just conservatives and sort of center, but even there's, gender critical folks who, are like, well, Blair White at least is,
Fuck Blair
a
White.
level head. Yeah, yeah. Like at least Blair White's against trans and kids. And it's like, yeah, but this is still a gay guy
Blair
who,
White is a misogynist.
yeah, he's showing us exactly what he thinks of women,
Yeah.
just the way that he presents.
Well, and like the things he says too, like
Yeah.
I saw one post where he like basically, you know, thought women shouldn't have the right to vote. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And even if he, even if he was joking, it's still like, that's such a tired
oh, and
joke.
another
Too,
one, he said that people that falsely accuse men of rape should be have the same criminal punishment as rapists. It's like you don't fucking have any clue what it's like to be a
Yeah.
woman if you're gonna say that shit.
I saw that and I was like, okay, dude. Like,
Yeah.
cringe,
Obviously lying about rape is wrong, but it's not
Mhm.
nearly as traumatizing as the, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. It's, yeah, it's just gross. Um, but going back to the double speak thing or the changing of definitions, that's another thing that I have a lot of beef with the reform movement, like giving a female name to a male. Another thing is they started introducing non-binary names, which is ridiculous. Yeah, because in Judaism, your Hebrew name, it's either so and so Ben so and so or so and so Bot so and so. So like Ben for men, Bot for women. And then they started doing mabate, which is like a plural of because bot is like house of, like so and so, the house of whatever. And so mabate is like
The they of it.
yeah, the they them of it, and that I find to be not only nonsensical, but then it's bordering on this thing of you're not supposed to change the holy word at all. We
Yeah.
call it Lashon HaKodesh, and you don't change it. That's the holy word given to us by Moshe at Mount Sinai from God. So you don't change it, even if you want to, even if you're trying to finagle it to fit in modern times. You're just not supposed to do that, and I find it deeply against the Torah and Judaism as a whole. And even just
And
talking
rather
about
colonial too. Like it kind of reminds me of
absolutely.
how, the you've got like white liberals changing Latinx or changing Spanish
Mhm.
language. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the same kind of
Or
thing where
Two Spirit's a totally made up thing from the 90s. And it has no bearing in reality for indigenous people. Because that's the other thing too, is like so many people don't understand Jews and Judaism, because Judaism is an ethnicity and a religion, because it's an ethno-religion. And so that's why you can have Jewish atheists, somebody who's brought up Jewish is ethnically Jewish and is like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. The Jew leaves the religious aspect of it, fine. There's still always going to be a Jew. They just don't get the same privileges as Jews who are still following the commandments. But it doesn't matter to them because they don't give a fuck about the religious stuff. So no harm, no foul. But then
well,
it's
and like sorry, go ahead.
but then it's the secular Jews, the ones who really are disconnected from the religion, who have the most visibility because they are the most assimilated, because they are the ones that tend to be most accepted into Gentile society. The ones who assimilate the most are the ones we're like, yeah, yep, you're one of the ones we like. We don't like those crazy Hasidim who are running around Brooklyn and, doing their weird things, shaking leaves and making people smell lemons. Like that stuff seems crazy to everybody. I see that and I'm kind of like, oh, like I see what the Hasidim are doing in Brooklyn, where they have their little, during Sukkot, which is a week-long festival, celebrating like or paying homage to the 40 years that we wandered in the desert. And we lived in these little huts that you could put up and take down really easily so you could migrate. And so we build a sukkah, and it has certain laws that it has to follow. It has to be certain size, has to have certain leaves on top of it. And it has to be able to be put up and taken down really easily. And something that I find to just be adorable is that the Hasidim, which is the Hasidic Jews, will have like a little traveling sukkah. And they'll get people to come into the sukkah, and we do this thing called shaking the lulav and the etrog, and it's this big like palm frond kind of thing, and then this special kind of lemon called an etrog, and it smells really good. And you do this little like dance almost. And so when I see the little, the Hasidic guys with their traveling sukkah and being like, hey, do you want to shake the lulav and etrog? I think that is so endearing,
Yeah.
But the people who are farthest away from Orthodox, who are farthest away from that kind of Judaism, think it's weird. They're embarrassed by it. They think it's regressive. They think it's making Jews look bad. And personally, I'm like, I think you're the ones making us look bad, because you go off and spout all this bullshit that you feel like you can say because you are a Jew. I have the, I have the speakerphone, and I'm a Jew, so I can say whatever I want. Because you can just put "as a Jew" in front of something, and then everyone's like, okay, I'll listen to what you're saying, like you're not a clown. But if it's somebody who's like third generation, doesn't have wasn't raised in the faith, doesn't really know much about their own history, isn't educated on their own history, who are they to be going around telling everybody our business? Especially when a lot of it kind of feeds right into the stuff that that everybody complains about when it comes to Jews, if that makes sense. Like, for example, something I see online all the time is like people saying like, oh, we're not allowed to, can't talk about Jews. We're not allowed to talk about Jews because they're all
yeah.
Which, for one, I think that's ridiculous anyways, because every single day I see like actual abhorrent anti-Semitism in comment sections, it doesn't get deleted. I'll report comments. Instagram doesn't delete them. Jews is trending on Twitter all the time. So clearly you can talk about them. But they point to things like, the ADL trying to cancel people who,
what's the ADL?
Anti-Defamation League.
Okay.
Which is
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's an organization that was started, I want to say,
I know what that is. I was in like religious terms brain trying to understand that. So
yeah. So that was, I don't know, I can't remember when they were established, but they used to do really good work, and it was really about combating anti-Semitism and equal rights and education and all that stuff. And then in 2020, this guy Jonathan Greenblatt took over, and it started going super woke. And so when Kanye was going on,
2020 was a damning year.
It was
like I just like, yeah, everyone went nuts in 2020, and it's like since then. But the woke thing, I mean, my God, I used to consider myself woke, and I'm like, y'all are insane. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't surprise me that it took a shift in 2020.
Oh yeah, it went super woke, and then the ADL says shit all the time where I'm like, bro, why are you saying this? Like sometimes I'm thinking, I'm like, are you guys even Jews? Like, I feel like you're trying to make things worse for us because you just say shit that is ridiculous. I remember some tweet that the ADL put out that's like, I guess it was, the point of it was kind of pointing out dog whistles, which I think is a term that used to be useful because there were times where, especially before things went super mainstream in terms of woke and like QAnon and all that stuff, there were times, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, where people would be saying, they'd be talking about the globalists, but what they really meant was Jews. But now we're in a place where, okay, but we have to be able to talk about globalists because there are globalists.
There are globalists. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we
And,
have
like,
to
when
be able to
people
talk
say
about,
yeah, and then cabal has a negative connotation for Jews too. I was in a
yeah,
in a turf night, like, Zoom hang, and when I say cabal of pedophiles, I mean cabal of pedophiles. It has nothing to do with Judaism, but I do watch what I say now about it, because
Mhm.
one of my friends, turf, she was like, when you say that, I just immediately think, and I'm like, okay, I get that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I understand that impulse to be like, ugh, because when I hear cabal, especially because the word cabal is derived from Kabbalah, the Jewish
Okay.
mystic tradition. So that word in
Oh,
and of
okay.
itself comes directly from like the mystical Gnostic side of Judaism, which in and of itself is very difficult to study in terms of halacha, which is Jewish law. You're not even supposed to study Kabbalah until you're like 40, because it's too powerful,
Okay.
So it's like a Jewish magical thing. And so, for the past however many thousands of years, when Jews were looked at, especially by like Christians and Muslims back in the Middle Ages, it was like, what are these weird witchcrafty things that you're
Got
doing?
it. Okay.
And you're making weird potions and doing shit and little things in the woods. Like, it's weird, your little cabal, a secret cabal.
So I guess it sort of is anti-Semitic to say cabal. Then I just
I
was
mean,
going
that's
from
the
dictionary
thing, is
definition,
like,
but
yeah, for me personally, I'm like I can tolerate a certain amount of it because it just never goes away, So when
yeah,
somebody says cabal, I'm not like, you're an anti-Semite, because most people don't even know that that's where it comes from.
right.
Words tend to lose their meaning over time, or they change as they're trying
Yeah,
to
I
change.
had no idea that was where it came from. I just, yeah.
So, as they're trying to change definitions today, like, words do have different meanings over time. And so I'm not going to be sitting here, and that's where the ADL says shit where I'm like, you just made it worse, because they'll say things like, oh, don't say things like globalists and cabal, because those are anti-Semitic dog whistles. And then it's like, somebody's quite like, well, then why are you guys the way that the tweet was worded, I wish I could remember it, because what it ended up doing, instead of trying to educate on like, oh, just FYI, like, in the past, these words have been used as like code words for Jews amongst, like neo-Nazis and like just kind of weird
Yeah.
freaks. And so maybe like be conscious of that. The way they worded it just made it seem like, hey guys, we're admitting right now we're globalists, we're Kabbalists, and we're pedophiles. Like the way it
Oh,
was
okay.
worded,
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
was so poorly expressed, because obviously Twitter is a place where you can't properly express things. You have a certain amount of limited characters. And the problem with,
Unless you pay for that blue check now.
yeah,
I
exactly.
I kind of I hate the long tweets. I'm like, I bring just the sound bites. I don't like these
Yeah,
long tweets.
I don't like
Yeah.
reading them either. And so the issue with something like anti-Semitism or Judaism or the history of Jewish people as an indigenous tribe, it just takes fucking forever to explain all of it, So
Yeah.
when you filter it down to like, don't say globalist, it makes the Jews feel bad. That's then where people get this idea of like, we can't talk about the Jews. We can't say this, we can't say that, because the ADL is going to do this. And, the whole thing with Kanye, I thought that we as a community handled that the exact wrong way,
Oh, speak on that a bit.
Well, clearly he was having a mental health crisis, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, I think it would have been more conducive to be like, you know what, our sympathies go out to Kanye right now because he's clearly having an issue. Trying to punish him, trying to get him to come to a Holocaust museum, trying to, so was he the one that gave a donation and then the ADL? No, that was a basketball player. Oh God, that period of time was just, boy.
Oh yeah, that I forgot, so that he was talking about, the basketball player was talking about a movie, right, or something.
Yeah, it was like a Black Hebrew Israelite thing, which that's a whole other thing. But saying like, oh, we're actually not going to take your money because you reneged on your apology, all that stuff. It's like, bro, like you're playing into so many things. Like here you are like asking for money and then being like, actually, like doing a little Shylock kind of thing. And what else with Kanye? Just I don't know. I feel like we just made so much of a big deal out of it, and it should have been like, sorry, these are the ramblings of a man who's going through a crisis.
Yeah.
Our sympathies extend to him. Obviously, the things that he's saying can be, factually disproven, but we don't want to go on a tirade. We don't want him to lose anything by that. And especially because it went for days before Adidas dropped him. And that whole time, the lefty and liberal and progressive Jews were being like, Adidas has to drop Kanye, you have to drop Kanye. It's been so many days and you're still supporting Kanye. And I was like, guys, this makes it seem like we control the media.
Yeah,
and that,
I was going to say that it gives the exact impression he was saying. Like, yeah.
Exactly. It feeds right into everything that everybody already thinks about us. And, I've come to this understanding, or like my opinion of like, no matter what we do, we're going to be blamed for something. Back in the Weimar era, it was, we were the capitalists, the Rothschilds were controlling the banks, yada, yada. And then during the Red Scare here, all the communists are Jews, so it's like, we're capitalists, we're communists, it doesn't, whatever the world's ill is, it's going to come straight to us.
It's Jews' fault.
Yeah, exactly. So I just felt like, why are we playing more into the tropes that are especially harmful to us in this day and age, which is that we control the media and we're uber powerful and we can cancel people left and right. The reason that Kanye was dropped by Adidas is because the stocks tanked. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was about money. It wasn't because he offended Jews. That's why it took days and days and days, because eventually, people were like, I don't know, he's still going crazy. And now everybody's in on the fight and it's still going. It's something that could have blown over really easily had we just not gone nuclear about it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he was let go, again, because it was a financial liability for Adidas and not because they care about anti-Semitism, then it became a thing of like, well, the Jews took Kanye down and it was a Black man. So the Jews are definitely racist. This proves that they've been racist the whole time, despite the history of Black and Jewish unity throughout the civil rights.
Yeah.
So I hated the way that was handled, and it would have just been easier to ignore it, honestly.
Yeah.
And especially again, like Adidas, they don't care about anti-Semitism.
And people are over cancel culture, so that too, like that, it feeds into that. It all bundles together.
Yeah. So Adidas then, I think like a week later, revealed a campaign with Bella Hadid, who's like, the Hadids, boy, do they hate Israel. So
really,
well, they're Palestinian Americans.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I don't want to get it. The IP conflict will take a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But that right there, I was like, you guys don't really, it's not the anti-Semitism. It was the bottom line. It was corporate. It was your stocks were tanking. That's what it was. And then Dave Chappelle went on SNL and told jokes that then again made the progressive Jews all angry, when really what he was trying to say was, you keep doing the same shit over and over again. You keep shooting yourself in the foot. If you just let it go.
And Dave Chappelle's whole point is stop trying to tell me what I can and can't say. That's literally what he's saying over and over again, and people aren't getting it. He's like, stop telling people what they can and cannot say.
Exactly. And he goes on SNL and tells these jokes that he knew was going to offend the same people that
he did it on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And then they fell for it. They fell for the bait.
Yeah.
And it was like, comedy.
You're proving his point.
You're proving his point, one. And two, of all people to stop talking about this shit, Dave Chappelle. I mean, that's
no, he's a double down. Like he'll just double down. He'll never stop.
He'll never stop. And the more
No.
you know, tell him like, I'm offended and I wish you wouldn't say this, he's just going to say, okay, well then I'm just going to make it worse, you know?
Yep.
And, you know, and I, at the time, my therapist, I had a Jewish therapist and I was kind of talking about this stuff. And she was like, yeah, but maybe if he had just said, you know, talked about the history of how, you know, Jews were, fled to California because they're, you know, people in New York didn't want them there anymore because, you know, they were calling it Jew York. They thought it was going to get overtaken by Jews. So they were like,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, you know, and so a lot of them ended out in Los Angeles, and Jews built the movie studio system and they basically built Hollywood. And then that's, they don't control Hollywood. There's a lot of Jews in Hollywood, obviously, but that's because,
Well, there's a lot of Jews on the coast.
yeah. Yeah, Chicago has a pretty decent Jewish population. North, like the suburbs, Highland Park, for example, is very Jewish. There was a shooting there. And there was kind of debates on whether or not it was targeted specifically because they were Jews. I think they were, but I don't really know. I don't think we got a manifesto for that one either. But it's, yeah, that's the thing. And because so many people, you know, don't really know the history. So again, like why are there a lot of Jews in Hollywood today? Well, legacy. Basically, we had Jews build Hollywood in the 1930s, and then they had kids, and those people had kids, and you know, and then they tend to stay in the business that their family stayed in. You know, like I'll be an agent, I'll be a manager, family business, whatever. You know, or like I think Steven Spielberg's daughter was like trying to be a filmmaker or whatever. And you know, Jonah Hill's sister, Beanie Feldstein, like it's nepotism.
Well, I mean, that's what all Hollywood is, nepotism.
Yeah.
Actors, you know,
yeah. And a lot of industries are,
well, yeah, a lot, yeah.
So,
and it makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. But you know, we're pattern seeking mammals. So when you keep seeing Jewish names, it's really easy to laser in on that instead of all of the other people who are not Jewish, you know, because again, I lived in LA, I worked in the entertainment industry. I met people there all the time who were not Jewish, you know, so, and I don't know how many people are in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, but, you know, Jews make up 2% of the American population and 0.2% of the entire world's population. So even if there's statistically more Jews in Hollywood as compared to other industries like, you know, construction, it's only because of, you know, just how things panned out historically. We're overrepresented in certain areas and then completely, you know,
not represented at all. Yeah.
But you only see the light is only shown on the exceptions to the rule, you know, like I think a lot of Holocaust survivors in New York are, I think, I'm trying to remember the statistic. They're in poverty at 10% of the rate of other elderly people their age. And that kind of right up against the narrative of like Jews are wealthy and well off. There are victims of the Holocaust who are in poverty right now.
Yeah.
So
that's terrible.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, post-Holocaust, you know, America was a really welcoming, well, oh boy. So I'm trying to, before Hitler implemented the final solution, there was actually, and I'm forgetting the name of the conference, but there was a huge meeting with world leaders where he basically stated like, hey, I'm about to do this shit. And if you guys don't want to take the refugees, like, you know what's going to happen. And America put a cap on how many refugees they would take. Pretty much everybody there except for the Dominican Republic were like, yeah, like, you know, like we don't really care that much, you know? So it was only after the Holocaust and after the horrors that people were like, ooh, we look really fucking bad in this instance. So yeah, why don't you emigrate? And what's interesting is, so at the time, the land of Israel was called Palestine. It was not a country, though. It was the British mandate. And that's why it gets so confusing, or one of the reasons it gets so confusing. And again, I'd have to do a whole other like 3 hours on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to even have it make sense. But at the time, when people were not taking refugees, the majority of European Jews said, I want to go home to Palestine. That's where I want to go. They wanted to be there in the desert, even though it was not built up. I mean, it was a shithole at the time, you know? And so the people who then did come to Palestine instead of going off to America or, you know, Brazil or someplace like that, they were then left to fend for themselves in the desert, basically. They were actually put in displacement camps, which was very traumatizing for them because they just went from concentration camps into refugee camps run by the British and had to be stripped down and, deloused, which if this was somebody who had just escaped gas chambers, I mean, I can't even imagine how that could have felt. You know, you escape the most horrific thing that you could have possibly been through, and then you're being re-traumatized right again as you're trying to get to your homeland, the place that you have been praying about. I mean, it's so like all of Jewish liturgy talks about Zion, Jerusalem, Israel. You know, as much as people want to deny the indigeneity of Jews to the land of Israel, just look at the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. I mean, yeah, a lot of it is, mythology and moral tales, obviously a burning bush and parting of the Red Sea. You read that and you're like, well, that couldn't have possibly really happened. But there's also actual history in there. There's actual like lineages and people are named and bloodlines are named in the 12 tribes of Israel. These are people that actually existed. And you can verify that by going back to other sources. You know, the Romans talked about how they conquered the Jews and destroyed their temple for a second time. So when people deny the fact that Jews come from Israel, it's like, it's just so antithetical to written history. Yeah. But real quick, going back to like the refugee camps and all that stuff, you know, the Jews that returned to Israel, they were left to fend for themselves, basically. I mean, there were so many conflicts between Arabs and Jews in that region before Nazism, during Nazism. I mean, the leaders of the like the Caliphate and the Arabs of that area at the time, I mean, met with Hitler and were trying to implement the final solution in North Africa and the Middle East. There were actually concentration camps set up in North Africa. That was the plan. After they got rid of the Jews in Europe, they were going to move to Africa and to the Middle East. And the Arabs were in on it. They were like, yeah, fuck yeah, get rid of the Yehuda. We hate those guys. So,
wow.
Yeah. So you have, I think 600,000 Jews from Europe, survivors of the Holocaust, emigrated to the British Mandate Palestine at the time. And then there have always been Jews present in that area. They're called the Mizrahi Jews, because so in Europe there's the Ashkenazi Jews. Those are the Jews that migrated up into Europe and through Eastern Europe into Western Europe, and settled in sort of the Germany area. I think Ashkenaz is actually like a word for German. And then the Sephardic Jews are the ones that went up the Iberian Peninsula, ended up in Spain, then sort of moved over into like Central America, South America. And then the Mizrahi Jews, which they didn't really start getting talked about a lot until probably the past 10, 20 years, like Lebanese Jews, Syrian Jews, Persian Jews, places in North Africa and the Middle East where they were consistently ethnically cleansed, kicked out. I mean, Egypt, I mean, I don't even know how many Jews. In Yemen, there's one Jew left in Yemen.
One?
Yeah, there's one Jew in Yemen. Because after the state of Israel was created, they started working on trying to get as many Jews safely to Israel as they could. When a Jew returns to Israel, it's called Aliyah. And they had special operations, I think in the 90s, I can't remember the name of it, but they flew planes to Ethiopia to bring back Ethiopian Jews to Israel, because they were being ethnically cleansed. And they were bringing back so many, they didn't even have seats on the plane. They stripped all the seats so they could fit as many people as possible on the plane to bring them back to the homeland. And, you know, as soon as these people got off the plane, kissing the ground, you know, it's hard to describe that feeling of like returning to your ancestral home. And, you know, nowadays, that's the other thing too, is that anti-Semitism is different these days than it was, you know, pre-Holocaust. A lot of people think of anti-Semitism as one thing. And I think that's probably why a lot of Jews have been scared off from voting Republican, because of the tendency to, you know,
associate them with white nationalists and things like that.
The association with white nationalism, and how on the fringe, the very fringe, there are, you know, the loons and the neo-Nazis and all that. So I don't even think neo-Nazis vote, you know, because they fucking hate the government anyway. So it's like, you know, I don't know what they're doing. Sometimes I go on their message boards just to see what they're
There's
talking
extremists on both sides, and right now
sides.
both parties are pandering to their extremists. It's a mess.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's maybe why there's been such a tendency. It's the same thing with the Black community. I'm at a place now where I'm like, I don't understand why Black people and Jewish people are voting for Democrats.
Yeah, the Trump got more of the Black vote than any Republican since, I think, the passing of the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
So there's, I mean, still like Dems got like 90%, but it's just like it was a significant drop.
It's shifting.
Yeah.
And I think because of how much trauma is associated with like that fringe element of conservatives, it's just like, voting Democrat down the line. But something that's really emerged, especially in the past 4 years, since Biden got elected, is how much they are pandering to the progressive faction that wants to see the destruction of the state of Israel. Like, it's not just
and just the Dems' number one donors are Iran.
Oh yeah,
like
and
RFK was talking about some new $2 billion deal with something to do with Iran and Biden. I need to look more into that. But
the continual effort to and the Iran nuclear deal was started by Obama. And so Biden is just kind of returning back to Obama era, you know, hatred of Israel, honestly. And, you know, whether or not you're somebody who, you know, has a lot of problems with Israel, you know, or you just don't, I would personally rather deal with people who are like, I don't know enough about it, so I don't have an opinion.
That's kind of where I stand. Is in college, my professors were more pro-Palestine, so I have that education. But as I've gotten older, I just it's such a difficult thing for I choose to just listen.
Yeah. And Qatar,
because I don't, it's too complicated to have an opinion on, and I feel like I'm better, like I'm ignorant on the topic, so I'd rather learn from people and listen than express an opinion.
And that's what I would prefer. And you know, back when I was in the trans cult, I mean, it's crazy how much they like Queers for Palestine, that kind of shit. And I'm like, you went to Gaza right now, they would throw you off a roof, you know? And then they call it pinkwashing. They call the fact that Israel is a democracy that is, you know, cool with gay people, they call it pinkwashing, and it's all just to distract from the fact that they're committing apartheid, which is like, last time I checked, you know, 20% Arab population who can, you know, is eligible to be in the Knesset. Doesn't sound like an apartheid to me.
What's the Knesset?
It's like the parliament, the Israeli parliament.
Okay.
So, you know, they have representation in the Knesset. That is inherently not apartheid.
No, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, so whatever your feelings are in Israel, whether or not you're pro, you know, your sympathies lie with the Palestinians, when you start saying like Israel shouldn't exist, you know, that's when it's like, I don't like that. It makes me feel very anxious, because if Israel didn't exist, like it didn't during the Holocaust, where would people go? Where would Jews go if they had nowhere to turn to, if they're not allowed to go to Israel? You know, I mean, there was a lot of, during that time, not only caps on taking immigrants, and the Soviet Union actually did this a lot post World War II. They would not let Jews leave the Soviet Union. So, and a lot of Jews ended up in like gulags and sent to Siberia. The Soviet Union was actually really, really played a major part in disseminating a lot of anti-Semitic propaganda, but it was anti-Zionism. They were the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was written by the Russians. And then in America, it was disseminated by Henry Ford. He printed that shit out, and that really brought a lot of anti-Semitism to America. And to this day, people still, they deny the fact that that's a fraudulent text. I see it all the time, that the Protocols was real, and that was, it wasn't a sham, and it actually, that is a real thing, and that's the cabal, the Elders of Zion. So that's when it gets into the billionaires, that's where it gets really sticky. It's so hard to talk about them, because when you have George Soros funding a lot of shit that is like actually destructive to what's going on right now, like the HRC is not, it's not a human rights campaign anymore. It's
billionaires are their own league of evil, and it's not about Jews. If you're a billionaire, in my opinion, you're a bad person.
Yeah,
because you're just a dragon, you're hoarding wealth. But I don't associate that with Jews. I associate that with greed.
Totally. Well, but then therein lies the rub, because of the greedy Jew,
Yeah, but like there's plenty of billionaires that aren't Jews, and I put billionaires in a class of dragons. They're dragons in human form,
which you're able to do because you have common sense. People get crazy focused on George Soros, and then with Pritzker and Rothblatt. Totally. And I think Jennifer Billick does good work. I think that she is a little narrow in her focus. I think she's so focused on Pritzker, Stryker, and Rothblatt that she's not expanding it, because I don't think billionaires can control the world. I think billionaires just fund the foot soldiers, and I don't think they're necessarily pulling strings per se. I think they have ideas of what they want the world to look like, so they fund the things that they think will bring that world about. But I'm more concerned about, someone like Klaus Schwab and the WEF. And
the WEF is.
And the WEF, it's not a group of Jews, you can look who's involved with WEF. It's not like all of them are a bunch of Jews, I mean, no. Klaus Schwab's father, and I read this on Wikipedia, actually was a contractor for the Third Reich, making like industrial shit or something. So I don't think he was a party member per se. His family moved to Germany in the 1930s as a contractor, so he could be a contractor for the Third Reich. But that's when I'm like, okay, Klaus Schwab couldn't be further, from being Jewish. His dad worked for the Nazis,
Yeah.
And then the United Nations. I mean, if you look at what UNESCO is putting out in terms of sex ed, it totally lines up with all the gender ideology shit. It totally lines up with all the stuff that we're finding in the schools right now. And that's coming from UNESCO, which the UN hates Israel so much. And if it is a conglomerate of the nations, it's all the nations united, or at least the ones that they allow in it, you're inherently not going to have a lot of Jews in there, because there's only one Jewish state. So, that's why when people get really stuck on this anti-Semitic trash of there's a secret cabal of Jews, I'm like, it's not a secret cabal, and it's not of Jews. It's an open cabal who are openly talking about what they want to do. They're talking about net zero and telling us their plans. And it's very easy to see that that's going to greatly impact impoverished countries and poor people, which will probably lead to mass deaths and starvation.
We're entering a new stage of feudalism.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
they're telling us their depopulation plans. They're telling us exactly what they're trying to do. You can go on the
Yeah.
WEF website and read all of it. And it's crazy, the stuff that they're talking about. And it's right there in the open, but people want to focus on something that is just inherently, like, it doesn't make sense. Like the conspiracies, when you really drill down into they're nonsensical.
Yeah.
So, and then with the trans stuff, this is the other thing that drives me crazy with the secular and the Reformed Jews, is with the making us look bad. They pander so much to the trans lobby. It's mind-boggling, and I've been getting so annoyed the past however many months, because I keep seeing it over and over and over again, is the six genders of the Talmud.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, but I figured you were going to get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, eventually. I'll tell you something, culturally, it takes Jews like 1,000 hours to get to the point they want to make to begin with. We just love talking. Sometimes I'll be like talking with cancer at my synagogue and I want to jump in and say something. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And I'm like, wrap it up, lady. I got a soapbox for a second, So the six genders of the Talmud thing is one of the most misunderstood like Jewish things going on right now. I rail against it all the time on Instagram. I'll be in comments sections, being like, no, transgenderism is inherently against Jewish law. It is antithetical to Judaism. There's no way in hell that rabbis of the Middle Ages would have been cool with any of this shit. And then I get people saying like, oh, well, did you know there's 6 genders in Judaism? I mean, I've literally had people say that to me, like I don't fucking study.
I see it around lately a lot. It's all.
And yeah. And it all comes from, there was some reform rabbi, some female who's impersonating the opposite sex, decided to write a thing for the New York Times. I want to say 2016, maybe 2018.
Oh, okay.
Doing an op-ed explaining the 6 sexes of the Talmud, as I like to call them, because it's not gender, sex-based, and I'll get into that.
Yeah.
Basically using it, and like I was talking about earlier, manipulating the text to fit her lifestyle. I think that Reformed Jews have a tendency to do that. You're not supposed to drive on Shabbos, for example. You're not supposed to work on Shabbos. We live in a time where you're spread out from synagogue. My synagogue is like, I don't know how many miles away. I could not walk to synagogue. However, we make concessions. You can drive to synagogue on Shabbat because it's more important to go daven with your community, and to read from Torah, to hear Torah, to fulfill those mitzvot, than staying home because you had to drive. It's breaking that commandment is it serves the purpose of fulfilling more important mitzvot, and because we've had to do that in the diaspora, especially, I think Reform Jews take it too far, because then it's like, oh, well, going back to the gender affirming care thing. Well, yes, we're against castration and cutting the flesh, halakhically, but if it's life-saving care, if it's gender care. So now you're twisting what's been concessions that we've needed to keep our traditions alive, and therefore our people alive. You're taking it so far that you're actually perverting the text, and you're turning it against itself, and you're turning it against Jews. And I'm tired of getting like chastised and having it insinuated that I'm a bigot because I care about that I'm hardline on certain things in Torah. I'm a religious Jew. I don't know what else to tell you than like, no, castrating yourself is just it's crazy. It doesn't line up with my values as a Jew. And so this Reform rabbi, she was just writing about, well, in the Talmud, there's actually 6 different categories of, and she called them genders, which right there, up until we started separating sex and gender, it was it was a lot easier to talk about gender.
It was
because,
DSDs though, right? That's what it really is
yeah,
DSDs.
that's what they were. They were just development or disorders of sexual development. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And then people started running with that. You know, a lot of secular Jews who don't study Talmud, which, by the way, Talmud is rabbinic commentary from sages of the Middle Ages. So kind of during the same time as the it was like an enlightenment period in the Muslim world, and Jews lived under Muslim rule as something called dhimmis. They had to pay a tax. Their synagogues could not be built higher than a mosque. They had second-class status as citizens,
Okay.
but they were treated marginally better than they were under Christianity. So
Okay.
because there was sort of this renaissance of enlightenment going on in the Muslim world in the Middle Ages, then we had these really brilliant rabbinical thinkers and philosophers blossoming in Spain and other areas in that or in other Muslim places in that area or region. And so there was all these, they were writing down all their commentary. If you look at the Talmud, you have a tract from Torah in the middle, and then all the commentary around it. You'll have commentary from this rabbi, and then you'll have rabbis commentating on that commentary and telling them how they're wrong. It's almost like in academia, when it's just people publishing papers and responses to each other and just fighting with themselves about how they're wrong. You know,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on ResearchGate because I always want to be up to date with the most like you know, all the trans stuff and the gender medicine. And I'll see stuff from like someone like Michael Bailey, and it's like in response to these lunatics who said something stupid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's that's kind of how you can think of the Talmud. Of course, in a lot of Christian sects, they think of it as a satanic text, which is unfortunate because, you know, I really want to align with other Abrahamic faiths, but it's tough when they believe some really crazy shit about Jews. I people on Instagram that I would, you know, I was following and kind of we would chat, and they were Christian, and you know, I'd be like, yeah, we're seeing eye to eye on this. We feel like we're in spiritual warfare, and let's band together to defeat this gender stuff, which to me is like a paganistic religion at this point.
Yeah, it is.
And
It's a cult.
yeah, and then I'll see stuff where they're like talking about the elders of Zion and that's, you know, the Talmud is satanic, and I'm like, I can't fuck with you anymore.
I have seen something that the Talmud was satanic, but I was just like, I don't know what this is. So
yeah. So, you know, that, and when I was talking earlier about how I can tolerate a certain amount of anti-Semitism, you know, I was seeing the signs and I was like, you know, it's borderline. But then as soon as it starts getting into, somebody posted, and I blocked her after this, saying that Yahweh, which is the closest English translation that you can get to the name of God in Hebrew, it's the actual word is not pronounceable in Hebrew. It's spelled Yud Hey Vav Hey, and in Hebrew you can't pronounce it, which I think is actually very beautiful because God is so beyond our comprehension that you can't even pronounce his name. You know, but the closest that people can get is Yahweh. And I saw this lady posting about how Yahweh is a demiurge, which is basically like satanic and tricking the people into believing satanic shit.
I think I might know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you know too. Yeah, I think I know you know. And I was like, that I can't do it anymore. I was tolerating a certain amount of anti-Semitism from you, but now you're getting into calling my God Satan, you know.
Satan, yeah.
And that's where I was like, I gotta draw the line there. Blocked her. I was like, sorry, we were chill, but now it's, you know. So even finding Christian allies can be difficult because they can seem really like on the surface you're like, yeah, like we're cool, like let's band together, Jews and Christians and Muslim. I want to get Muslims in here too, you know, like let's all, we're the Abrahamic faith, we're brothers and sisters under the same God, like let's fight together. And then, you know, on one side, I've got like, oh yeah, I'm cool with you. I just need the state of Israel to be completely destroyed and decimated and, you know, whatever, like no hard feelings. And then over here, someone saying that Talmud is satanic. And it's like, you know, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, stuck in
Yeah.
the middle as a Jew. It's finding people to ally with. Again, like I can tolerate a certain amount of anti-Semitism, but when it gets too much, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And because the Talmud is so difficult to interpret, a lot of it's in Aramaic too. So there's just a lot of misunderstanding about it. And, a lot of the sort of, I don't want to say morality tales, but there's little scenes almost like it's a scene from a play and it's a rabbi and his wife. And on the surface, it looks like it's this really misogynistic thing that happened. But then if you study it deeper and you really, get in there, it's actually saying like this man cannot live without his wife. Like he like they're partners and they need each other. And yeah, they have their different roles. And on the outside, this might look like it's this, horrible patriarchal thing. But it's actually, she was actually getting the upper hand in her own way. And so when you read the Talmud at the surface level, you can see stuff in there where you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is some bullshit. But when you really dig deep and get to like the metaphorical stuff and what is this actually trying to teach you, you can find things that are just really unexpected and really beautiful. I've actually cried during Talmud study classes before because it just hit me in this way where I wasn't expecting it, because it is such a deeply difficult text to parse through. And a lot of it, when it has to deal with law and the sort of minutia of Jewish law, that's where we get into the 6 sexes of the Talmud. There's man and woman, and then there's something called tum-tum, which is the genitals are concealed. And so then they have to cut it open to see what's under there. And then if it's, male genitalia, you do the circumcision and all that stuff. And then, but they're still not treated as a full man, because it wasn't, whatever they had, it was not intact. The androgynous hermaphrodite, basically, which, that's what I was talking about at that time. And then the alien notes, I believe, are women who didn't develop through puberty and are infertile. And then the saris are eunuchs, basically male eunuchs. And I feel like I'm forgetting. No, those are the 4 ones. Yeah. So those were basically the rabbis talking about DST conditions and what do we do with them? They can count for certain things, but they can't have this status. And, if there's X amount of females, this person counts as that. And you can go, there's an app, it's great. It's called Safari. You can literally just put in the search tum-tum and it will give you, midrash after midrash after midrash of what do we do with these freaks, and they're not really talking, they're not talking about them in the kindest terms, but they're like, well, they're Jews. We don't want to expel them,
Well, that seems to be the misinterpretation of the gender woo a lot. Like, I guess they weren't called two-spirit, but the effeminate men in indigenous cultures, the ones that had that treated these effeminate men, they were the more patriarchal tribes, and they were forced to go live with the women. It wasn't this like respected category of man,
celebrated thing. It was like
it's like you're the wrong kind of man. Go live with the women.
Yeah, exactly. Or I know there's some indigenous cultures where it was like, yeah, there's a group of these guys. They like being girly and they're effeminate and they like kind of dressing up as ladies. So like, I don't know, go off and do your own thing. Like, don't bother us with this shit. But like, it's you're making us uncomfortable, So
yeah,
it's and the two-spirit thing that was I think I consider that a colonizing force.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Just as I believe the whole bringing trans into Judaism, that's just colonizing. And it's really unfortunate. There are secular Jews that I follow on Instagram. There's one that I follow because she's actually a really great historian. She's a really, really great source on history of Holocaust, history of Israel, just Jewish history in general. I mean, she's very talented with that stuff. And you can tell she's very well read. She doesn't ignore sources that go up against her beliefs. And she uses that as a way to get to a better idea of historical accuracy. Because when you have conflicting, what's the word I'm looking for, accounts of certain historical events, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But then when it comes to the trans thing, it's like her brain is falling right out of her asshole. It's like, how have you not even taken the time to even check out what the other side is saying? You consider yourself a Jew who, even if you're not religious, you're still living up to the ideals of truth above all. And yet you say things like transphobes get blocked on site, no TERFs in the comments. She posted a thing about the 6 genders of the Talmud once again. And, in the caption, it was like transphobes get blocked. And it's like, so you won't even sit here and listen to what the opposition is saying. You're just blanket banning them from your comment section because it goes against your warm and fuzzy feelings for the alphabet community. Which again, like now the alphabet community front facing, it's just TQIA plus. That's the community now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the activists and the queers and the straight people who, like to
Spicy straights.
Yeah, spicy straights, they like to go to dungeons and shit like that. Which, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, but the AGPs, the Wachowski brothers, they basically got transed because one of them were going to like sex dungeons in Los Angeles, and he started fucking with this dominatrix who was married to Buck Angel at the time. And that's how he got transed. And then his brother got transed after that.
That seems to be, I did 2 interviews with formerly sexually exploited women, and one of them was a dominatrix, and she experienced that, like, where all of a sudden he came out as a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It seems that when they take on that sissy role, it's a progressive depravity.
Totally. So, and and when I think about The Matrix, which is still one of my favorite movies of all time, I feel like, like they hoodwinked all of us into participating in their fetish, because all of, the stuff that Trinity wears and the aesthetic, that came straight from that sex dungeon.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And there's this Rolling Stone article that gets into all of that shit that was published in maybe 2001, 2002. Impossible to find. I lost the link to it. Someone sent it to me. It was on Kiwi Farms, which I hate going there because, boy, you want to talk anti-Semitism.
Oh, really?
Oh, Kiwi Farms. Oh, yeah, full Holocaust deniers in Kiwi Farms out there.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't like spending time there, but I did at least find the link to like a Wayback Machine, but it's not even the Wayback Machine because you can't find it on there. It was an archive post of that Rolling Stone article, and they're like making fun of him. He hadn't come out as trans yet, but they're like making fun of him for going to these sex dungeons, and they made that point of tying it into like, oh, the aesthetic of the Matrix then came from that underground dominatrix culture. Okay. I can't, and so after I read that, I was like, these motherfuckers, these AGPs not only put their fetish on display in a wildly popular movie, but they got all of us to unwittingly participate in it, which is what AGPs are always trying to do. That's what they do when they're going out in the world. They're getting you to participate in their fetish, and you are not doing it consensually. It's very, it's not just colonizing words and colonizing our spaces. It's colonizing our ability to even consent, because if there are people who do not know that this is a fetish and that these men are getting off on the fact that they're being affirmed as women, and they're getting that validation, the validation is part of the fetish. And so if you validate them, you're participating in their sexual desires and their sexual paraphilia.
But then sometimes they like to be, they have a humiliation fetish. So it's like, there's really no way to engage with these men in a way that doesn't fucking feed their fetish. It's enraging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know what to do other than to just like ignore them. Luckily, I'm in the suburbs of a city. Oh, my cat. Oh, hey, Genji, no way. Oh, he is not going to start going off right now. Genji, my mom's cat. Oh, I totally lost my train of thought. I was talking about AGPs.
We were
Oh,
talking
luckily, yeah. So I live in Illinois, which is I don't know if you know Karen Davis of You're Kidding Right at all, but she calls it Wokistan. Any sort of really uber blue state, she calls it Wokistan. So I'm in a Wokistan state. And Pritzker is the governor, by the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I know
uh,
that. I went to
yeah.
DePaul
Okay.
University.
Yeah.
So I spent some
So,
time in Chicago, and I grew up in Michigan, so
okay.
Chicago
Yeah.
was like the closest big city.
Yeah. So luckily I'm out in the suburbs, so I feel like I don't have to worry about encountering AGPs too much in bathrooms, because again, they do have the laws of anyone with lady feels can go into the women's bathroom. So I'm thankful I'm not in the city, at least, because I feel like I'd be dealing with that shit quite a lot. But like at this point, I'm just like, if I see one of them, like I'm just gonna ignore them. I'm not gonna participate at all. I don't care if they think I'm a bitch.
Yeah,
I don't even acknowledge it anymore. I've gotten to a point where I can't participate in it anymore. I've already told people, like, I don't do the pronouns. Uh, I'm not going to participate in the pronouns, even if they're not, even when people are talking about them and they're not present. I'm not doing it. I'm not participating in it. And I don't know. I feel like, if regardless, like whether or not it's a validation fetish or a humiliation fetish, I think the best thing for me to keep myself sane,
disengage. Yeah,
disengage and not consent to participating at all. I
yeah.
can't do it. I cannot do it anymore. And I think it's such a huge mistake to allow this ideology to infect Judaism. And there's even, at my synagogue, there's conservative, they're conservative Jews, but they're liberal politically. And like I'm in a choir for the high holidays, and I have a bumper sticker that says woman, adult, human, female. And so far, no one's really had a problem with it. No one's confronted me about it, either because they silently agree with me, or they just don't want to get into a fight, or they think I'm a bigot and they want to, steer clear of the
Yeah, but
trans.
if they thought you were a bigot, they'd probably try to get everyone against you.
True, true, true. Well, I don't
Hopefully
know.
hopefully they silently agree with you.
Yeah,
That's
I think that's probably the case, especially because there's a lot of older people at my synagogue. But this guy started asking me about my bumper sticker on the way out, and he was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" I was like, "Oh, it just means what it says. A woman is an adult human female." And he goes, "Well, what about transgender females?" And I go, "Well, they're men." And
good for you.
yeah, yeah. And he got so angry, and it turned into like a 45-minute tirade. He started talking about a book that he's writing. And, anytime I would say, like, yeah, well, but like women's sports, it's not fair that they have to compete against males. And, he would fall into that same thing of like, oh yeah, but the estrogen makes them not as strong. And it's like, yeah, right. It doesn't make them as strong as other men, but they're still stronger than women, or
Yeah.
he has a trans friend. And it's clear that he really cares about him. Like, that's really what this is coming from, is he has one trans friend and he feels really bad for him. And he's probably a really nice person. He's probably like a lovely person who just happens to be fucked up in a certain way, And because I'm trying to understand where this guy's coming from. Because now that I'm on the other side of it, now that I'm fully out of the gender woo, I'm like, how does anybody actually believe this? Like, how did I fall for it? And he just dismissed every rebuttal that I had, because his main thesis was that, like, oh, well, women's sports isn't even going to matter in the future anyways, because technology and AI is going to make it so that we can just like leap into other people's bodies, or like
Oh God, I really want
yeah,
off the planet sometimes. I
yeah,
really, this tech stuff is a Pandora's box I don't want to be around for.
yeah, same. He was basically getting into like transhumanism. And
Yeah.
I started getting really flustered, and I was like, I just find it to be against God. That is like my final. I was like, I just find it to be against God and Torah. And he was like, well, I'm culturally Jewish, and I just come here, for the choir and to be with people. And I'm like, right there is the fucking problem that I've been talking about. Is like, yeah, it's great. It's nice if you're a cultural Jew and you just like going to synagogue and being with people, but you don't actually believe in any of that shit. That's fine. I don't care. Come daven with us. Come do whatever, you know. But if you don't believe in it, you can't get mad at other Jews who actually give a shit about the Torah and give a shit
Yeah.
about, you know, what the what Hashem handed to us at Mount Sinai. Like that, like I care about that shit. It's if he doesn't want to care about it, that's fine. But it just gets to be condescending and offensive to, you know, be told like, well, just because I'm cool with it, you should be cool with it too. Like we have to be nice. My friend is, you know, my friend has been saying, oh, I wish I could have transitioned as a kid. Like my life would be so much easier, you know, and he's going on, he's like,
With
and
all
you
your
know,
disabilities that you're gonna get, like your brittle
exactly,
bones and your
exactly.
like child-sized
The
penis, like
the dementia, the Alzheimer's,
yeah,
the shrinking brain, the
the
in,
dementia's probably still gonna happen.
yeah, and like the increased uh rate of stroke and all of that. Yeah, like I mean, he's gonna
Yeah.
get dementia anyway from being on estrogen, but you
Yep.
know, the your bones not mineralizing properly, the plates not
Yeah.
fusing, you know, you're going to be in pain for, you know, so there's no way, of course, when you're an adult man who masquerades as a woman and your deep bass voice gives it away all the time,
And your
you
bone
know,
structure and now, like, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Your brow ridge and, you know, your big shoulders and your narrow hips and your giant hands and your big feet, you know, yeah, I can see why this delusional man would be like, oh, I wish I could have done this as a kid. But he has no idea, you know, he has no idea how that would have panned out for him. You know, there's
Probably
just
not well health-wise.
probably not well at all. I mean, Chaz Jennings
Oh,
makes
it's so
my
horrific.
heart break. I feel so bad for him, but at the same time, I'm like, but now he's participating and pushing it. And part of it, I think, is
Yeah,
because
but it's his parents and the money and like I don't think he has a way out,
I don't think he does either. And
you
it's
know?
so sad because you can see the cognitive impairment, you know. Um, Obviously he got into Harvard because he's Chaz Jennings, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but when he expresses himself, it's like a 12-year-old. It's not the type of cognition that you would expect from an Ivy Leaguer. Not that an Ivy League education means anything anyways these days, you
Hmm.
know, at all, because and an interesting thing going back to a point that I wanted to make when we were talking about the university system is the number one funder of like the ethnic studies and Middle East studies in American universities is Qatar. So of course you're going to get a pro-Palestinian narrative
Yeah. Yeah.
because the Qatari government is funding it. So
Interesting.
yeah, and that's why I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, I love Al Jazeera. They're, you know, they do great reporting." And I'm like, "Oh, you mean Qatari state-run media?" You know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing is like Al Jazeera will do really good reporting on like they did great stuff on the war in Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq back in the 2000s. But you know, they deeply, deeply hate Israel, so you're going to get a biased opinion on that. But anyways, back to just this guy at the choir, you know, part of me, I wish that the conversation had gone better because I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to bring you a bunch of proof. I'm going to bring you all this data. And I printed out like, it's literally a stack this thick. And I'm thinking now, I'm like, I don't know if even if I give him all this proof, I don't think he's even going to be receptive to it because it's
No, it doesn't sound like it.
going to go against, you know, everything that he believes and you know
Yeah.
he obviously cares so deeply for his friend and he feels so bad for him and you know because he was like he feels so bad about or she because he was using her pronouns, you know, like, oh, but her voice, it just always gives her away. And I'm like, bro, it's no way it's just her voice, his voice.
Yeah.
You know, like there's other shit that's giving it away. I've gotten to the point, I was so deep in the trans community that I don't think any of them pass ever now because I can clock the small things that give it away, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Are
there
you a
was
lesbian?
bisexual.
Okay.
Yeah. So um there was a a trans-identified female that came to check out this synagogue one morning, and from across the room, I was like, oh, that's a trans, I was like, oh, that female woman over there that has double.
And females have a higher chance of passing than males too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll tell you why she was so easily clockable, besides the tiny wrists and the patchy beard and the frog voice.
Sorry.
No, from across the room, I could see, because she was overweight, I knew she had top surgery right away, because it was completely flat chest. Whereas when you're a man who gets fat, you've got the moves.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's ridiculous to have this completely flat chest.
And then this, a belly.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So even from, however far away across the place, I was like, great. Now there's a trans at my synagogue. Luckily, she never came back.
Yeah.
So maybe there are more older transphobes in the congregation than I'm aware of. Maybe she didn't.
Oh, I have to plug in my computer. It's low battery. I just realized. I did not realize it was there. Okay.
So, yeah, it's the state of things. When I heard that my synagogue doesn't do gay marriage, but is cool with gay people, I was like, which is, as someone who cares about gay people, I was like, it's not because I don't want gay marriage, but I was like, okay, if they're committed to that part of it, then maybe they're less open to the trans stuff than I assumed. I was at a Reform conservative synagogue for a while. And because the Reform part of it, there were a lot of, there bunch of coming in to convert, and, the Reform side was all for it. One of the Hebrew school teachers that I was friends with, her husband, AKA wife, transed herself, and did it after they got married. And she cheated on her too, and she's still miserable. And now she has all these health problems because of the testosterone. And, so I was like, oh no, like after I peaked, I was like, is the conservative movement going in the same way? I hope not. I want to find a synagogue that doesn't entertain this kind of shit. And, as somebody who was like newly going to the synagogue here in Illinois, I didn't want to come in fast and loose and be like, what's your trans policy? They don't know me like that.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a friend that I'd made, and she was saying, well, I think it's ridiculous that we have anybody present marching in the gay pride parade, as allies, when we don't even do gay marriage. Why would we do that? Why would we represent our congregation in the pride parade when we don't even do gay marriage? And on the one hand, I was like, that's a great point that you're making. But then on the other hand, I was like, yes.
Yeah. I've been trying to find a church here in Texas, and it's like, it's either they're preaching against same-sex attraction, or they're captured by the alphabet mob. And it's like, I can't seem to find a happy medium, because I don't want to listen to a sermon that says, oh, like we freed them of same-sex attraction. But I really don't want to go to a church that is okay with transing children.
Yeah. I would imagine. I know for a fact you would not want to go into a church bathroom and then there's a man in there. No, but
it's like, I don't consider myself dogmatic. I believe in the Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
I'm not super like in the book with it, but I support gay rights. I support, the innate quality of same-sex attraction, but I really don't want to go somewhere that's okay with transing children, specifically like the pushing that stuff, or that has like a trans-identified pastor or whatever. That stuff, it doesn't align with Christianity. I don't get it.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
God didn't put anybody in the wrong body.
Yep. That's
like,
at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. If you're somebody who believes and is actually like committed to the ethos, there are 613 mitzvot in the Torah commandments. There's no way that we're all doing 613 of them all the time. It's just like it's this impossible task, and that's the struggle is kind of what makes Israel literally means to wrestle with God. So it's Yeah, it's part of our practice and our ethos and our spirituality that like it's a struggle sometimes, you know, it's a struggle to uphold these commandments. A lot of the mitzvot, you have to be in the land of Israel, not even the modern state, that just the land of Israel. You have to be there to fulfill these mitzvot. So the diaspora Jews inherently are not doing these mitzvot because they're not in Eretz Israel. So there are things that we pick and choose. We all do it. We pick and choose what we, you know, adhere to. But I would like to think, I would hope to think that anybody who takes the Bible, be it the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible or the Quran, anybody who takes those seriously would never think that God would put somebody in the wrong body.
No.
You can believe that, like, and I obviously don't agree with this, but I could understand the belief of like, oh, your homosexuality is an affliction, something you have to fight against. I think that's a terrible thing to do, but it makes sense with like the laws, you know. But there's nothing in any Bible, any Abrahamic text that would suggest God would ever put you in the wrong body on purpose. Like, it doesn't make sense. You're created in the image of God. That's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense that he would put you in the wrong body. Why? There's nothing about it that makes sense to me. You know, if you want to be, you know, a hardliner and think of homosexuality as like something that you could pray away, or it's just a weakness, you know, I hate that, but it kind of makes sense to me in terms of the scripture, even if I think it's outdated and bigoted. But there's just nothing in Judaism or Christianity. I'm not well versed in Islam. I would imagine same thing. I don't think there's anything in any of those texts that you could even derive the idea that like, oh, I just was put in the wrong body.
Yeah.
Just absolutely not. It just doesn't make any sense. So and then for Jews, especially, if you have this law against castration and cutting the flesh, I mean, I don't understand how you could fall for the gender affirming care stuff too. There's a tale, I guess you could say, or an article from a newspaper back in, I want to say the early 1900s. It was a Yiddish paper in the United States, I believe, and a woman wrote in about this interesting person called Beryl Bale, and it was basically a lesbian, but a butch lesbian. This woman who just never fit in with femininity, you know, was really burly, you know, looked ridiculous in dresses, just didn't fit in with the girls, and everybody was in the shtetl, which a shtetl, by the way, is, if you don't know, a Jewish village. Where they were very insular. And another aside, there's this weird thing going on with like secular, and I'd say Reform Jews as well, but definitely the Jews who are really disconnected from the history, who are like, it's like cottage core, but like with the shtetl, like they'll be yearning for like shtetl life. When in actuality,
wait, what's shtetl?
A shtetl is a Jewish village.
Okay.
Like if you know Yentl at all, something like that. She grew up in a shtetl. It's like a little Jewish community in Europe mostly. I think, yeah, like Europe, because shtetl comes from I want to say, I don't know the linguistics behind it, but you know, there were a lot of shtetls in Russia, the Ukraine area, Ashkenaz, like that, all that. And shtetls would get raided all the time. They would be pogromed all the time. You know, so I don't know why you would yearn for the shtetl when you were severely impoverished, and you always had to worry about people coming to destroy your entire village and murder and rape and throw people down a well. You know, I don't understand why you would want to romanticize that. But yeah. So anyways, now I forgot. I went on an aside and now I forgot my main point. Beryl Bale. Now I remember. So the newspaper article is talking about this clearly butch lesbian, and the rabbis don't know what to do with her. She doesn't want to get married to a man. They're very confounded. And she leaves. They decide to take her away somewhere. And she's gone for a bit. And then when she comes back, she has short hair. She's dressed as a man. She has a new name, which, because I believe her female name was Beryl, and then she changed her name to Baal. And everyone just kind of accepted her as she was. And they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, you're Baal now. But everyone called her Beryl Baal. They were still acknowledging the fact that she was a woman.
Okay.
And the way that this story has been disseminated on like Twitter and Tumblr and the usual TRA activist corners is like, look at this, these progressive, accepting shtetl Jews totally believed in the trans, and they've believed in trans the whole time. Look at Beryl Baal. They were so happy to bring this lesbian back as a man, and it was so great. And it's like, no, again, this was a freak that they didn't know what to do with in their eyes. I'm not calling lesbians freaks, by the way.
Well, and it's also still regressive if like
Yeah.
she can't exist as a butch lesbian.
Yeah, exactly. But they
She's
did
got to
let
play
her
the role of the male. Yeah.
Yeah, they did let her get married to a woman,
Oh, really?
but the only way that they would let her get married to a
But
woman
as existing in a barrel
as a
bail.
man. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. So it's still, yeah.
In that sense, it's like it's both regressive and progressive because you have a gay marriage, but the only way it is, I mean, it is a trans kind of thing in that sense.
Yeah.
The way that gay men who just can't accept their own homosexuality and would rather be seen as straight, they'd rather be seen in a straight relationship. It's kind of like that, except in this instance, it was more like, we don't know what to do with you. The only way that we can accept you into our society is if like, yeah, go ahead, just pretend to be a man. That's, we won't talk about it. You can have your wife, whatever. We're still going to call you Beryl Baal. We're still going to dead name you, and it's like an outlier thing. The Rebbe's didn't know what to do with her, and they obviously didn't want to be cruel and expel her because that's really just not part of the values of Jews. We wouldn't want to just kick somebody out because they were a lesbian or whatever. Which is why in like modern Orthodox, it's like a don't ask, don't tell thing. Cause it's like, well, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like we know, but we're not going to talk about it. So it's really just kind of making a compromise, which is a Jewish tradition at this point. Like we've been compromising for a really long time. But when you compromise too much, it destroys the tree of life. You forget your roots if you go too far into the acceptance. There's got to be some gatekeeping. And even with certain Jewish law, that's ridiculous. There was some group of Jews, although sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if you guys are actually Jews. Sometimes people are LARPing. A lot of people online claim to be Jews when they're not. It's really weird because then they can, because then they can do the as a Jew thing, and then make excuses for why somebody is or isn't an anti-Semite, or it's the lived experience thing, of like, my lived experience has more
I
weight.
hate that phrase though. If you've lived something, you've experienced it. It's such a dumb.
Well, and it's also totally lived experience is totally anecdotal. There's no way you can't have data on a lived experience. I got into a heated discussion with a TRA in an Instagram comment section because we both had completely disparate experiences as trans people, because I do consider myself a detransitioner. I was on testosterone for 6 months. Almost.
Oh shit. I didn't realize that. I thought you just meant you moved in those circles like you were captured because of your friends. I didn't realize you.
They totally after I peaked, I was like, I fully got talked into going on testosterone by these people.
Wow.
Like that's how deep the indoctrination goes. Because I was resistant for a really long time. I'm a singer. So I was like, I can't go on testosterone. It'll destroy my singing voice. But then people started telling me, no, if you just practice and you just keep it up, you won't lose your voice. You won't lose your range. Just lying. Just people straight up lying.
Yeah.
Just lies. So, thankfully I got off of it before it did too much damage to my singing voice. But, I still, part of my upper range, I never really recovered. So there have been slight physical changes that are permanent, that aren't super obvious to other people, but they're very
And
obvious.
you were only on for 6 months?
6 months. And I was on very low
Wow.
dose because I was non-binary at the time too. I was like non-binary, trans, mask, all that bullshit. Which was just like code for like, I still haven't dealt with my sexual trauma, you know? Um,
Yeah.
uh, and so because I wasn't, considering myself like fully, a binary trans man, I wanted to take testosterone really, really slowly just to see what it was like. I actually even had a friend say, oh yeah, it's
Thank
like,
God.
yeah, right. They were like, oh, it's like microdosing tea. Like you can just microdose it. So I was taking like half the amount that they would give to people right away, which by the way, also the
Okay.
gender clinic that I went to, they prescribed me testosterone after one appointment. So it's the same old story. People want to say it's not happening, but it is. But anyways, I got
Yeah.
into a back and forth with this person because all of my experiences as a trans person were completely disparate to hers. She was saying like, oh, I got called slurs and people were harassing me and targeting me and blah blah blah, and we still, people here get the shit kicked out of them, and that's the trans experience. And I'm like, I was celebrated, everybody kissed my ass, everybody talked about how brave I was, stunning and brave, all of that stuff. I never got harassed. I didn't experience any of that. So
Yeah.
how, they cancel each other out. And I also made the point of like, how do you know that they were saying slurs to you because you were trans? Because they might have just saw a butch lesbian and decided to harass you on that instance, as opposed to, oh, there's one of those trans people. There's no way to verify.
Yeah.
You can't go to the people, and also if this alleged attack even happened, it's not like you can go to
Well,
the other.
that's also, it seems like it's a clout chasing thing. It's like this like wanting to be oppressed.
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. And that's where I get a little prickly with some of the lefty progressive Jews, because they're the ones who are offended the most by everything. They're the ones who will call shit anti-Semitic that is not anti-Semitic. They're the ones that are saying RFK is anti-Semitic because he said weird shit about vaccines or something. Like
Plus, I want to hear the whole quote. Like this thing, this man goes on long diatribes that are very nuanced, and it's this short of a clip, which is like, I'm sure you were taping it for longer than that. Let me see the entire thing, please.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. They take things out of context and they run with it. And then, a sound clip gets on Twitter, and then you get a whole bunch of, Gen Z Jews being like, oh, he's an anti-Semite. We can't vote for him. He's an anti-Semite. And it's like, bro, you'd rather vote for Joe Biden than RFK? Joe Biden, who's in bed with Iran, Joe Biden, money to the UNRWA, which directly goes to Hamas. That Joe Biden, you want to vote for the guy who gives money to
that's
Hamas?
what RFK was saying. He was like, I'm a steadfast supporter of Israel. Look at what Joe Biden's actually doing.
Yeah. And so that's it just, sometimes I feel like minority groups are their own worst advocates. I just feel like we put people out there to speak for us that are just so disconnected, that having the woke Jews. I mean, there's this group called the Tel Aviv Institute. And man, I can't stand those people. They're just uber wokeists. It doesn't make any sense to me. There was this one guy, I don't think he's part of Tel Aviv Institute, but he's really popular on Instagram. There's this type of there's a word for Orthodox people, like really observant people, called frum, F-R-U-M. So when you say like, oh, that's a frum Jew, it's somebody who's Orthodox and is Shomer Shabbos and all this stuff. They follow the Torah very, the mitzvot really hardline. They have to do things a certain way at a certain time, not lax about it at all. And there's this guy on Instagram. I won't give out his handle, but I'm sure if you do some digging, you probably find him. He's a frum guy. But he's also woke, which I'm like, interesting. And he posted something at like a gay pride parade, not a gay pride parade, excuse me, alphabet pride parade, because of course the gay pride parade is now just TQ plus parade.
Plus now trans gets their own parade. Can you imagine if the LG tried to do that?
Oh, please. They'd get Trantifa in there and, people, it just turned into violence. And I took that post and I posted it in my story. He blocked me like right after I did this, but I was like, this dude calls himself from, and he thinks that somebody can be born in the wrong body and that cutting their tits off and castrating themselves aligns with Torah. Like, give me a break. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand how you can be, woke that way,
Yeah.
but he's a guy with tons and tons of followers, like thousands of followers on Instagram. So he's influential in that way. He's an influential Jew, and I think he's making us look bad. Sorry about it, and I'll probably get it because he's he's a person of color, and I'm a white passing Jew or whatever. So I'm sure, I would get flack for that. I don't really fucking care. Because again, I don't understand how you can call yourself from and then be supportive of trans. It just doesn't make sense to me. So and so yeah, people like that, the wokesters, the Tel Aviv Institutes, people who have a lot of online clout, they're the ones that are calling everything anti-Semitic when it's not. They're the ones who are getting all up in a tizzy about RFK. They're the ones who will, like the ADL, and being like, oh, you said globalist? Oh, you're talking about George Soros, a man that exists? Anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater. And it's like,
yeah,
it's like you're gonna sit around and call some off-color joke in a movie, anti-Semitic, and then the whole movie's anti-Semitic, and we can't support this movie. Like, it's just so stupid. It's like, get real problems, which is crazy because Jews actually do have real problems,
Yeah.
So we have to have armed forces, we always have to have a police officer at our synagogue on Shabbat services, because there are psychos who go and shoot up synagogues,
Yeah.
and so when you're a completely disconnected, assimilated Jew, super woke, who doesn't go to synagogue, who doesn't have to do active shooter training before you can teach kids there, who isn't getting the shit kicked out of them in Crown Heights or wherever in Brooklyn. That's the thing, is like, the other thing too is that hate crime statistics have been greatly inflated in terms of,
because now misgendering is a hate crime, and it's
there's this group called Combat Anti-Semitism, and they peddle this like this fear-mongering stuff of like anti-Semitism has skyrocketed, look at all these hate crime incidents, but then you get into it and it's like, because somebody was talking about George Soros on Twitter, like, that's not a hate crime. But then in reality, the truth is, though, as I do think anti-Semitism has been on the rise, it just not in that way, because I know Orthodox people in New York City who they're modern Orthodox, but they know a lot of Hasidim, and those people, the guys with the curls and the black hats, and the really just like stereotypical looking,
the Hasidic Jewish community.
Yeah, the Hasidic Jewish community. Those people are getting the shit kicked out of them often. Like, they're getting attacked in the streets, and it doesn't get reported on. And it's because most of the people that are punching them, like they get punched. I've seen footage of Hasidim getting punched in the face, and it's by Black and Hispanic youth mostly. So one, they don't want to. One, nobody wants to report on it because Hasidim are the Jews that are hated by the secular Jews. They have pick-me Jews at the New York Times who will just do nothing but shit on the Hasidic community, and just paint horrible pictures of them. I mean, yeah, of course there's problems in the community. There's problems in every single community, but there's just like this intense embarrassment and hatred of the ultra Orthodox coming from the ultra non-Orthodox side. And for some reason, I feel very protective of them. I think it's because they're sort of upholding a sort of Judaism that is like a remnant from our recent past. That kind of Judaism was, really like, I mean, they've lost so many people over the years in terms of pogroms and the Holocaust. I mean, shtetls, again, like the shtetls were like, they were like those stereotypical looking Jews. Like that was the sort of the aesthetic. And you know, they just faced horrible pogroms in Russia and Ukraine. And so when I see them, and when I see them getting punched and harassed and spat on, it brings up just these really intense feelings of like history repeating itself, you know, like it just,
Yeah.
there's that hits me so much more than anything Kanye West could say. You know, it's a mentally ill man going off about how Jews control the world and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, we've been through this before. Mel Gibson went on a tirade once, you know, and that's the other thing too, is when they say, oh yeah, Jews are going to cancel the anti-Semites. You can't talk about Jews. It's like, yeah, Mel Gibson went on a drunk rant.
And he's, yeah, his
Yeah,
career's doing just fine.
yeah, exactly. He blamed Jews for everything. And, you know, and I saw Hacksaw Ridge.
I didn't see it.
I thought it was good too.
I
Like,
kind of want to see Sound of Freedom though.
I did see it.
Was it good?
You know what? It was actually, it was very moving. And
Really? Okay.
yeah, because as soon as I saw people saying like, oh, this is QAnon, this is anti-Semitic, again, I'm like, why are you turning a movie about child trafficking into a thing?
And it's based on a true story. It's the media representation of this is unnerving to me. Like,
Yes.
I'm just like, it makes me feel like they are covering for pedophiles now.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's
knowingly, like,
yeah. And it's extremely disturbing and upsetting as a Jew in particular when I see the you know, the pick-me Jews who are peddled out on CNN and, you know, mainstream media being like, well, you know, this is a QAnon thing, which, as we all know, is actually a blood libel, and you know, it's all about Jews. So if you support this movie, you're an anti-Semite.
is
And
that
it's
what
like,
QAnon is? I still haven't been able to figure out what it is. One thing that kind of
QAnon.
touched me is that they like apparently think Michael Jackson's innocent. At least I saw some video on Twitter. But I just don't really, I don't understand what it is. I've tried to figure it out. I know that they think JFK Jr. is coming back from the dead or something.
They believe crazy things. Honestly, I also think the impact of QAnon has been greatly overblown by the media as well. I don't think QAnon was ever as massive or as influential as the media wanted to paint it as.
Part of me thinks that it was made up and created conspiracy theory to cloak the actual issue of pedophilia, because now if you say that you're, you know, worried about normalizing pedophilia, people automatically like kind of associate you with conspiracy theory QAnons. And part of me just thinks that they did it on purpose, but
yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I know it originated from 4chan, which they're you know, notorious for being trolls. Somebody was claiming to be an insider in the deep state or something like that, called Q. That
yeah,
was, you know, and then he would get all this information about, you know, all these horrible things going on in the government. And, you know, a lot of it was just claptrap. It's something about, you know, the Clintons and all these influential world leaders drinking the blood of children because of the adrenochromes in the blood, which is,
yeah. And then I see on Twitter like the Qs and the Anons are separate, and they're like, we know you don't know anything about Q or Anons if you're saying QAnon, because they're not the same thing.
it's a lot of, as we call it in the Jewish community, it's a lot of mishigas, and it should never have really been taken seriously. I mean, if it was some sort of like plant to distract from something else, like, hey, it worked really well.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, like it worked great. But if it really is just like the delusions of 4chan trolls and extremely online nut jobs, then it's actually extremely like harmful for the media to have ever taken it seriously and to amplify it. Because if it isn't some sort of, you know, psyop or whatever, if it's actually just, if a duck is just a duck in this situation, then the media played a huge part in overblowing
Amplifying it, yeah.
and amplifying it and giving it so much more attention. And the, you know, the whole concept of world leaders drinking the blood of children, that is blood libel. That is classic blood libel. So you know, it to bring it up though, again, with this movie, Sound of Freedom, which was written, they started writing it in 2015. So
Yeah.
pre-QAnon, and
Yeah.
again, based on a true story. Um, it's like, why are you bringing that shit up, man? Why are you peddling out the Jews at your, at CNN to say that this is anti-Semitic?
Yeah.
Why are you tying Jews to pedophiles once again? It was
Yeah.
bad enough with Epstein, that whole thing, like, which, it's funny is when the Epstein thing first started happening, I was not on the camp of, he was, murdered in jail, because a lot of pedophiles who get caught, especially like really highly influential guys like that, they usually take the coward's way out and just kill themselves instead of face retribution. And I'm somebody who on the surface, I try not to fall into conspiracy theories, because more often than not, the end point of the conspiracy theory is just anti-Semitic bullshit. So I was like, no, he was a pedophile who killed himself.
Yeah, didn't they, like, the guard happened to not be there, the cameras happened to not be working? There's too many.
Yeah. And I kept explaining it away of like, yeah, well, prisons are, like nobody's doing their job. The government's incompetent. Why do you think the prison system would be competent at all? But now that I'm farther out on it, I'm like, I think the Epstein, the whole thing was another distraction. Obviously, he was a pedophile. Obviously, he and Ghislaine Maxwell were trafficking. Obviously, Epstein Island was a thing. And the client list hasn't been released, and I do think he was murdered. But I think he was also the sacrificial Jew, because if we kill him,
Well, it seems like he was an informant potentially.
possibly, yeah. So if we kill him,
then they would.
Not only are we going to hide the fact that there's way more of us, but then we have a convenient scapegoat, as always, which is the Jews. We can distract it with the Jew of it all, because if you think Epstein Island is the only pedophile island owned by a billionaire, like, you're an idiot.
No. Yeah.
And there's, I think as of right now, like 195 billionaires in the world. And I'm telling you right now, statistically, it's not possible for all of them to be Jews, just based on population alone. So when the most, forward facing, like the one that everyone's talking about is Epstein, it's so easy to be like, okay, good. Let's redirect, and we can go back to doing our shit, and no one's gonna think it's us, because the same old story. It's the Jews, as always. And when it comes to people like Soros and Pritzker and Rothblatt, I think of them as Jews who are similar to the Jews who would acquiesce to a regime, be it the Nazis or the Soviets, and work with them because they think, if I work with these people, we have a common goal. Communism, for example. I'm a Jew in the Soviet Union. I want communism to thrive. I don't care if that means getting Jews to give up their religion, to give up their Zionism, to disconnect themselves from everything that makes them Jewish. I'm going to do that because I believe in communism, and Stalin has promised me if I serve faithfully, I will be fine. Those Jews were the first ones that ended up at the wall. Jews that joined the Nazi party still ended up either in a ditch or a gas chamber. There was like 140,000 Jews that actually like worked with the Nazis in concentration camps, and it's just like they weren't accepted by the Nazis. It was just if we can get some Jews to do the dirty work for us, then when we finally got all of them, like, you're gone too. So when I look at people like Soros and Rothblatt and Pritzker and other Jewish billionaires, I do think that they have their own intentions. I think that they, have the world that they want to live in, and if they fund it, that's them, contributing somehow to whatever ideology that they believe in. But they're beholden, I think, to higher ups, people that are more high up, like the WEF and the UN. I think those people have more power. The billionaires fund everything, but there has to be a unified, and that's where we get into the globalist stuff, and that's why it gets hard to talk, because it does start sounding conspiratorial. But again, this is all stuff that is openly being talked about by these people. The WEF is putting out how we can get to net zero, how we can contribute, working towards a totalitarian global government. And that means working with the CCP and Russia and other, communist regimes, and then getting Biden to move more towards the progressive left, the woke stuff. This is all, it's all. And then when you say like a new world order, that also is a dog whistle. You can't even say new world order, because you'll have the paranoid Jews who have heard that a million times from neo-Nazis, anti-Semitism. But I don't know what else to call it than a new world order that Klaus Schwab, for example, is trying to push for, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's just so many billionaires who are funding a lot of this stuff. But I really do feel like they are, if you think of them as like managers, and then all the things that they're funding are like the bureaucrats, and the apparatchiks, and the people who are the foot soldiers that disseminate this stuff, the people that put it in the university, the people that implement DEI and ESG. It's impossible to have a cabal of people controlling everything if you don't have swaths of people who believe in the same thing carrying this shit out. So you can say that it's, a small group of people controlling the world, but there's millions and millions of people who are willingly getting into this because they truly believe in the end goal. They really think that the goal that we're headed towards is great.
A utopia. Yeah.
Utopia. They think we're headed towards utopia. Be it communists or, the new thing that they're trying to do with stakeholder capitalism, which stakeholder capitalism is just corporate fascism, basically. I get a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Fascism is corporate. It is corporatism. That's what Mussolini defined it as. It's corporatism.
Yeah. So, there's just so many corporations, bad faith actors, there are the actual psychopaths and the narcissists who are pushing a lot of this stuff because they just want the power, and they're not doing it for what they think is going to be utopia. There's always that faction of people in any movement. But I do think the majority of the people who are pushing for this stuff, they're useful idiots. They don't realize what they're engaging in. They really, really think they're going to get to utopia. And that's what's sad about it. And so it's not so much a small group of people controlling the world. It's just a new religion taking the world by storm. It's an ideology, and
how pedophilia seems to always be involved in the new religions.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's why when Jews get accused of on whole being a bunch of pedophiles, again,
come on, the Catholic Church.
I know, right? It just doesn't
that's good. And I was raised Catholic, but if you're going to associate any religion with pedophilia, it's Catholicism.
Right.
Come on.
Who do I follow? I think her name is, I can't remember how to pronounce it. She works for Redux. I think it's like Yalia Alma or something like that. She does really great reporting. She posted a picture of an article she wrote about this guy. He was like some pedo apologist. I don't remember the story, but he's a Jew. And in the comments section, even of that, of somebody who writes for Redux, being like, I saw the nose and the name, and of course he's a pedophile. So it's definitely it's been a long disseminated trope of Jews and pedophilia, Jews and homosexuality as well. But the pedophilia thing doesn't make sense to me because the moral code of the ancient Israelites was created, like they started doing animal sacrifices because they didn't want to be doing the child sacrifices that the pagans around them
Oh,
were. They
okay.
saw child sacrifice and they were like, that's fucked up. Like, we'll sacrifice a ram, but we're not sacrificing children, which is something that, you know, the Aztecs and the Incas were doing. That's kind of that was sort of the ethos going on over there with the pagans. So it's just interesting to me. And it's not to say that there aren't Jewish pedophiles. Of course there are. But that's the problem with being Jewish. That's what's hard about it, is that any bad behavior that is committed by a Jew is then attributed to all of us.
Yeah, and that's what minorities have to deal with a lot. Yeah.
And historically, you know, as soon as those kinds of rumors start spreading, it ends up being very, very like physically dangerous. Because once people get into enough of a tizzy, and they get so distracted by it, I mean, it's happened over and over and over in Jewish history, which is why I think it would be so much more useful if people studied Jewish history a little bit more, because they might actually learn something from it. A lot of people are under this impression that, like, you know, Hitler hating the Jews just kind of came out of nowhere and it was like some sort of convenient thing, when it just was like, if in a long line of people blaming the Jews for things. There was bunch of skeletons found in, I want to say Norwich, somewhere in the UK, possibly. They found these skeletons at the bottom of a well. And they had inklings as to who those people were, but they did DNA tests from the bones. And yeah, it was a bunch of Ashkenazi Jews who were thrown down a well because of a bunch of a blood libel that was being passed
Oh,
around in the
no.
area. So the blood libel rumor was happening. You know, the either putting the blood of children in matzah, or, you know, eating children in the woods or something. And what everybody decided to do was, let's throw all these Jews down a well. So, you know, when the progressive Jews get all up in a tizzy about the anti-Semitism, you know, even when it's not anti-Semitic, I understand the impulse, because if you are really
It's grounded in legitimate fear.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And people get so tired about hearing about the Holocaust. If you're a Jew hater already and somebody brings up the Holocaust, they're like, oh, here we go again, you know. And even more sympathetic people, they kind of get annoyed sometimes. Like, they do. Like, I can, like, oh, you guys are talking about the Holocaust again. And it's sad, because I think the more we try to, you know, bang the pots and pans and be like, no, look at our suffering though. Like, look at what happened. We're trying to tell you how for that to not happen again. Like, literally the slogan of the Holocaust, which I hate even saying something like that's like sick to say, but never again.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we got out of this. Like, this never can happen again. And then when you start feeling like, oh, it feels like it might be happening again, then you're ultra paranoid, and then everything,
Yeah.
whole lens, all the world around you, you see anti-Semitism. And then that's why I feel like so many, you know, so many Jews who are, you know, in the media, or have a lot of clout, or have thousands of followers on Instagram, I think they are seeing everything through that lens, especially if they're woke, especially if they believe in all that intersectionality stuff, because everything is through the lens of victimhood. And
Yeah.
and then on top of that lens of victimhood is this legitimate fear that once the blood libels start going, once we're talking again about how Jews control the banks and control the media and all of this stuff,
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, it feels a little hot in here. You know, you do start getting a
Mhm.
little nervous, but you can't be led by your emotions like that. Like, you have to be more discerning, because when you start calling everything anti-Semitic, then the actual dangerous instances of anti-Semitism are blown off, you know. And I was doing some research last night, because I keep seeing comments in comment sections and in certain posts, you know, especially if it's like a Jewish meme page or something, and they post a lot of spicy memes. There's always going to be somebody in there being like, I mean, how did they even kill 6 million people? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, where did they all go? Like, how could they, like, I'm just asking questions. I'm not denying that the Holocaust happened. I'm just saying the numbers don't add up, which is still a form of Holocaust denial. And so I was doing some research last night about other genocides. And, I was just struck by the fact that, I believe it's the Turkish still deny that the Armenian genocide happened, but everybody else in the world has accepted that the Armenian genocide happened. Nobody denies that the Rwandan genocide happened. It's interesting that the Holocaust is the one that
gets denied, that there are actual Holocaust denials.
Yeah. And again, this happened in there are survivors still here that are alive that tell their story. And it's like, it's almost, it's like this catch-22, because you want to keep telling the story over and over again, because maybe if you hear it, if you guys listen to it, maybe you're finally going to get it, and you're going to see, you're going to understand, you're going to, the suffering that we've experienced is going to click in, and you're going to realize that, like, no, we got it. We have to stop this shit before it turns into, a whole fascist or, totalitarian thing. I don't like saying that Jews are a canary in a coal mine. I don't think that's, one, I think that's dehumanizing. And two, I don't think it's totally accurate, but there is some truth to the fact that once the Jew hatred gets really, really pronounced, that's a bad sign of the times that we're in. It's just not a good sign. And so I think there's this instinct in the Jewish community to constantly try to explain the Holocaust. And that's why people get fatigued by it. But it's like whack-a-mole, because as soon as you're like, nope, that Holocaust denier, like, no, you have to be educated, another one pops up, and then they just keep popping up over and over again. And so basically what you're doing is, like, then you turn it into, I call it the Holocaust Museum industrial complex. We keep resurrecting museums to the worst thing that's ever happened to us. To what? To get people to feel bad for us? They don't feel bad. The people that hate us will never feel bad. The people who are sympathetic to us are going to start getting fatigued by the fact that we constantly talk about the Holocaust. And then there's this lack of self-awareness of how weird some of the stuff that we put up in a museum is. I was talking to this lady who was saying, she works at a Holocaust museum, and they're doing holograms there now, which I find to be so eerie and strange and discomforting. Like, I don't know how to explain, like, it just feels so strange to make holograms of dead Jews to talk to people about what Auschwitz was,
what they went there.
And it seems to be falling on deaf ears. It seems to be the only people who really appreciate it are Jews. So, I think Holocaust museums, there's a few that I'm like, yep, that one's like valid. Like the one at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I think that Holocaust museum is great. It should, there's a reason it's there. I think it's a very well done museum. Yad Vashem in Israel, very moving. It's even hard to put to
the one in Berlin is really beautiful, like really powerful, I think.
So there are museums where it's like, yep, this is a good museum to have. It's it's good at educating. It drives the point home. It's not. But when it gets into this like weird hologram shit, or like new innovative ways to make people feel bad about the Holocaust, I feel like it defeats the purpose almost. And I think the most beneficial thing when it comes to Holocaust education would just having better education about it in the schools. I just think that would do more than resurrecting more and more Holocaust museums. There's this really great comedian, Modi Rosenfeld, who has this joke about how whenever there's an anti-Semite who makes like a big statement, the answer is always to bring them to a Holocaust museum. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense, because they're going to go to this Holocaust museum and be like, I had the best time of my life. Like that's exactly what they're going to want to see.
Yeah.
So,
we gotta we're at about 2.5 hours. I don't know how much
Yeah.
my listeners will handle.
Sorry
This has
about
been
that.
great. No, it's okay. It's just that I just feel like at 2.5 hours, I feel like that's about as much as people are going to listen to a conversation. But I do like to end. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Is that you just
No, I
don't
said
be
absolutely.
sorry?
No, I said absolutely.
Oh.
That time, yeah, absolutely.
But I do like to end these conversations with what you would. I guess I don't know if it's fully in the vein of this conversation, but what you would say to someone that now is the time to speak out about gender ideology. But I guess however you'd want to close it, really, because that didn't really follow this particular conversation. We talked about gender ideology a bit, but we talked more about spiritual feminism. So is there any like last points you'd want to make before we wrap up?
I would say listen to religious Jews more, and not just Ben Shapiro, but try to find Jewish voices that that actually, that aren't like Instagram people and woke people, that we're out here, I mean, if anybody ever wants to, slide into my DMs or something, like I love educating on this stuff. I love talking about Judaism and our history.
Yeah, I'll include a link to your Instagram in the
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I would say, basically, I would say just listen to Jewish voices that aren't mainstream, I would say.
Not necessarily secular.
Definitely. I think secular Jews have said enough.
Yeah, they're the reigning voice in the media.
So they don't represent everybody. There's a really great podcast. They're politically conservative as well, but it's called the Commentary Magazine Podcast. Really eye-opening opinions from religious and politically conservative Jews that we're like, oh, not all Jews are like that, huh? So really, really seek out different Jewish voices, not just the libs, not just the seculars, not just the reforms and the Democrats. Go see what some Republican Jews are saying. See what they're saying.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I'm gonna when I'm editing it, I'm gonna learn so much more again, listening to all of it over again. All right, well, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.